Okay, we are live on YouTube and on Instagram. How's everybody doing? Just when I said I keep missing the live, you did not miss it. Nira and next, I don't know the first part of that, but I know you're a bear, and that's very cool. So, yeah, you did not miss it. Hello. Starting to get people filtering in on Instagram and on YouTube. I want to talk today about the Standard Model. And, I'll repeat this as the stream starts to build a bit more. But must it be so mote it be? I don't know what that means, energy god. But I want to talk today about the Standard Model and why I think it's broken, and how we broke it, and the evidence for this. So, and I did speak semi-privately with a very famous physicist who agreed with what I'm going to say, but I'm not going to say who they are because they haven't announced this idea publicly yet. But I can tell you that if you are at all involved in physics and keeping up with what is happening right now in physics, you've definitely heard of this person. And they are PhD accredited, as much as that means nothing. But still, if it does mean something to you, there you go. So, for those of you that don't know, the Standard Model is basically it's like the periodic table for quantum physics. So for what is before and preceding of the periodic table of elements, which I think is wrong. I hope it wasn't Bill Nye or Gates. It's definitely not Bill Nye or Bill Gates. I would not be crediting them to boost my credibility. But basically, it is the model that we use to help us understand all the properties of what are called elementary particles. And elementary particles are what go on to make up the rest of the particles that we see, and I'm going to discuss why elementary particles are actually not particles. They are the illusion of particles. And basically, the Standard Model, and I'm going to show it in a minute, but it consists of what are called matter particles and what are called force particles or force carrier particles, which are elementary, my dear Goldstein. Yep. And yes, Bill Nye and Bill Gates both, I guarantee you, have honorary degrees, which are more useless than even real degrees, which are pretty useless. But basically, we have matter particles and we have force carrier particles, and what are called bosons. And then the matter particles are the fermions and the leptons. The leptons are electrons and neutrinos, and the let me just pull it up, I'll show you. And then you have the quarks that basically make up all hadrons, which are protons and neutrons that make up the nucleus of an atom. But let me pull it up so that you guys can see. Those of you on YouTube. I just redid, by the way, for those of you who have seen the stream in the past, like redid a cage for one of my blue geckos over there. It's looking nice. Okay, wait. Okay, there we go. And then on YouTube, go. Let's go here. And we'll go here. We can also go to my work here. Okay. This is the standard model. And just to make it easier to see, let's just move it down. And then we can go here. Okay. This is the standard model, for those of you. And what we have is we have bosons right here. We can make them, how about we make them red-ish. And then we have the fermions right here. And the fermions are divided into 2 degrees of freedom, essentially. And that is, let's make this... can do electrons should be like what, yellow? Neutrinos can be gray. Positive quarks are masculine quarks, so they can be blue. And negative quarks are feminine, and so they can be pink. And then maybe we'll make this green. Okay, so this is the matter particles right here. And this is the how we categorize all of the most fundamentally observed bits of matter that go on to make up everything that you can see and touch and and interact with. Kind of. These are force carrier particles, or bosons. They're different. And what's different about them is that they're almost like they carry a force. Okay, so I call these, the matter particles, ironically, call them force points. So we can call them here matter particles, aka force points. And nobody else calls them force points but me, and it is very accurate. So the force points, or matter particles, are basically points of force that God, or the universe, is enacting on the world. So imagine if you saw like a large, I don't know, like a screen of stretchy material. I don't know what it is, but any kind of fabric. And it was just pulled tight and it was flat. And then imagine the universe, or God, is that fabric, but he's standing on the other side. Imagine he pokes his finger onto the fabric. You'll see a point appear where all of a sudden it's like something has been raised from to be distinguished from the rest. An area has been raised to be distinguished from the rest. This is what these are. And these force carrier particles, bosons, are very different. And what's interesting about my model here is that what you'll notice is there's one missing if you know anything about bosons, and that is the Higgs boson. Okay? And the Higgs particle was commonly called, for years, the God particle. Okay? And the quote-unquote God particle is responsible for supposedly causing mass to be observed, which is essentially gravity, which is why it's called the God particle. And it's not a coincidence that gravity and God both start with a G. And the physicist who I'm going to reference, but I'm not going to name their name because, like I said, they have not yet come out with this theory publicly, and I'm sure that's for a, that's very strategic, and I will let them do that in their own time. But they basically admitted that they believe that the Higgs boson is bullshit. This God particle Higgs boson is not real. We observed something that is real, but it's not the Higgs the way that we think that it is the Higgs. And I'm going to explain why I think that they're right. And it has to do with symmetries. So, when we're looking at this, one of the things that you can notice is that there is a triality or trinity that is appearing in the generations of every single different type of elementary particle. So, when we look at the positive quarks, there's the charming, and the truth, or top quarks. The negative quarks, or the feminine quarks, so we could say here, negative feminine. Masculine. And I mean that literally. I mean feminine and masculine literally. The positive quarks are masculine. The negative quarks are feminine. So, but when we look at this, we see up charming or charm and top or truth. And then we have the down, the strange, and the bottom or beauty quark. And if you think about men and women and masculine and feminine, you don't usually describe a woman as charming. You'll describe her as beautiful. And, but you won't describe her as charming. You will sometimes describe, men know this, but like some women that just have this like, this alluring mysteriousness, I guess, about them. We do find it like strange. So I think that the idea of strangeness is definitely a feminine mentality. Charming is a positive or masculine mentality, and truth is obviously a masculine mentality, but beauty is a feminine mentality. And by the way, the truth is beautiful, always. And because at the level of of complete objectivity, at the level of God, there is a union between gender. God is both genders, and He is the truth, and He is the beautiful. The totality of existence is completely true and completely beautiful. But you can obviously see that anything that is considered top is masculine and bottom is feminine. That's obvious in a lot of narratives involving masculinity and femininity. So, this is a trinity. So is this. And what's happening here is that it's an increasing of mass scale. So, there's more force as you go down this. So, an up quark, a charming quark has like more to it than an up quark. And a top or truth quark has more to it than even a charm quark. And a bottom or beauty quark, same thing. It has more to it than a strange quark, which has more to it than a down quark, at least from the observed perspective. Then we get to electrons. And you start at the top with an electron. Then you have a muon, which is kind of it's like a heavier electron. And then a tau, which is an even heavier electron. Then you have neutrinos, and you have electron neutrinos, and then muon neutrinos, which have more force, and tau neutrinos, which have even more force. And I think about this as like when I describe that these particles, the matter particles, are force points. If you envision a cloth and someone is behind the cloth, and that someone is the universe or God, is poking their finger onto the cloth from the perspective, and you're seeing it from the other side. So you're not seeing the man behind the curtain, essentially, but you're seeing their finger poking onto the fabric. A muon would basically be him pushing harder on the fabric than an electron. Okay? So it would create a larger divot. It's greater force applied. So then you get to the gauge bosons. And, the bosons. The Higgs is not, I don't think, a gauge boson, but Higgs. And what's interesting about this is that for a while we were looking for what's the force-carrying particle of gravity. They originally hypothesized that this would be gravitons. So they thought that this Higgs, instead of a Higgs here, it would essentially be like gravitons. And the reason for this is that we have four fundamental forces in physics. One is the gravitational force. The other is electromagnetism. If I spell anything wrong, sorry. I'm terrible at spelling. Then we have the strong force. We have the weak force. And what the weak force is responsible for is decay. It causes decay. The strong force holds the nucleus of an atom together. So it's like, or trying to explain how this basically best makes sense to relate it to other things. But the strong force holds together. Just like, that's probably the best way to put it for now. Electromagnetism is obviously for electricity and magnetism. We're going to show how this obviously relates to everything else in the world. But all of this comes from my models. And gravity is the gravitational force is gravity. The ultimate force. Let's even highlight it or underline it. So, for a while, though, they thought the gravitons here would be found to be the force carrier particle of gravity. They have not found gravitons anywhere. Photons, let me see here if I can make this easier. See, okay, so a photon is the force carrier particle of electricity and magnetism, essentially. The Z and W bosons are all responsible for decay. So W, Z. And then the strong force is a gluon. And this is very easy, okay? It's not complicated. Anybody's like, quantum physics is so complicated. It's not. And everybody who's listening and is like, oh my gosh, a gluon, a photon, a neutrino, this sounds so crazy. Let me explain. It's not. A gluon holds things together. It glues on. Okay? It's literally gluing on. It's glue on. It glues things together. It's very obvious. Photon, think about photos. It's about like light, okay? Photons, obviously, which is basically electricity and magnetism. You can think about how photons come from a light bulb. Light bulbs are powered by electricity. So basically, the photons are the carrier particle of electricity and magnetism as well. And then boson has 2 to it. It's a positive and a negative. And then there's a Z, which is essentially like neutral. And they are responsible for everything falling apart. Decay. Okay, so like you can think about Z, because it's W positive and W negative. Between it is Z, so Z is the neutral expression of the weak force, so you can almost just be like Z. And Z is the end. What happens at the end? It all falls apart. That's the end. That's how you know it's the end, because things have fallen apart. So that's how you can kind of remember what these do, if that makes sense. Is that gluons glue on. Photons are responsible for the carrying electricity, because photons are light and they come from light bulbs, which are powered by electricity. And Z is the end, and Z is when everything falls apart, which is decay. Everything's falling apart. But in order to cause mass, physicists needed to fill in this blank. And first, like I said, they tried to do it with what they called gravitons, which are tiny little particles, supposedly, that carry the force of gravity. They don't exist. I'm telling you, they don't. And I'll explain what this actual solution to this is, I believe. But then, instead of that, because they couldn't reconcile that, they were like, okay, let's say there's something that causes mass, but not gravity. By the way, there's really no difference. What do you mean there causes mass, but not gravity? I understand there's 2 perspectives of this, but mass is caused by gravity. That's it. That's it. How much do you weigh on the moon? Okay, I know some of you we can get into this, but just bear with me here. Supposedly on the moon, you weigh less than you do on Earth, because there's less gravity. Gravity is responsible for how much you weigh. It is responsible for mass. It is responsible for force inflicted. And they came up with the Higgs. And I realized when I was making a model, I'll show you. This was years ago, so this is a very old model, that I had made essentially this, when I was first learning quantum physics. And basically, just to not confuse anybody, imagine you're inside of God, or the universe, which is this gray. And let's also make this gray. No border and gray. Okay. And when you're inside, you see all of these various aspects of what we call the standard model. And like I said before, here's your electrons, your muons, and your taus. Your electron, neutrino, muon, neutrino, and tau. These are the leptons. And then you have quarks. And together these make up the fermions. That's why they're all green. They are the matter particles that I told you about, the force points. And then you have your bosons here. And obviously there's one missing. And they filled this in with this, the Higgs. And while this seems like it's a fix, okay, it's not. What they were trying to do is they were trying to preserve symmetry of this system. And so what they did in order to do that was they figured that the bosons here have to essentially line up with what we're seeing here. And they do. What it really is this. It is the graviton. But the graviton is equal to the universe. Or you can even say God. Okay? There's only one. And you're inside it. So all of this gray is the graviton particle. This is how you preserve the symmetry. So basically, like I said, there's all these forces. Get rid of this one, essentially right here, and just make it gray, because it's part of the system itself. And just go here. Merge. Merge. Gravity. There's your forces. Okay? That means we scrap. Let me just make sure that I copy this because I need to still have my original models. But to preserve symmetry always, because symmetry is beauty and beauty is truth, you scrap these. And you now go like this. Okay? And now, on the other side of it, we can say graviton, and then photon, and then gluon is responsible for gluing things on. Gluon is the strong force. The weak force is decay, once again. And, or I guess actually what you would want to do is you'd want to do this. This is the Z boson. This one is the graviton. Or let's move this real quick. Sorry, guys. Graviton. There you go. This is how you preserve symmetry in the standard model and still actually like do it right. Up, down, let's say this is up, charm. I like charming instead of just charm, but I guess we'll just put charm because that's what it's called right now, but I write charming. And then this would be top or truth, and then this would be strange, and just bear with me for a minute, and this would be the down. Okay. Like this is like, I'm not even joking. If this is correct, which I'm almost positive that it is, this is like Nobel Prize worthy stuff. I'm not exaggerating at all. Not even in the slightest. If you can contextualize the standard model to be better than what is currently, considered, the truth, like, you are gonna, if it's proved, then that you will win a Nobel Prize. Unless you are saying that quantum physics has moral implications like what we're doing. But But you'll see this is beautiful once this is done. Merge. Merge. Bingo. We can even go like this. We can say merge and call this leptons. And this one we can call quarks. And then we can make it all nice. 19. And this is Garamond, because Garamond is the best font ever. And then we can just there you go. You have to search for beauty. But most people don't know what beauty is. They think that they know what beauty is, but they don't. And what is beautiful is what is symmetrical, eternally, completely, complete symmetry, not partial symmetry. Say this is 12. This is 12. Bingo. And here you can say merge. This is for the fundamental forces. And these are the bosons. There you go. Look at how much more beautiful that standard model is than the current standard model, which is right here. Where is it? This is the current standard model. Okay, this is the cream of the crop, guys. This is what our brilliant people have made. And they were brilliant. Most of the people that made what we have here were brilliant. The issue is that the people who are now in quantum physics world and leading quantum physics, what we call quantum physics, who we call quantum physicists, who are not, they don't understand even the concept of symmetry. And, Sabine Hossenfelder said, beauty is leading physicists astray. She doesn't know what beauty is if she says that. Beauty can't lead you astray. Beauty leads you to truth, to symmetry, to totality, to completeness. But what people are confusing beauty with is sexiness. And sexiness it's what is beautiful in a moment, but fleeting. It's finite beauty, not infinite beauty. It's what is nice and symmetrical just right here, but not here in totality. Okay? What is beautiful is what is complete. What is sexy is what is incomplete. Think about even sexiness. It's like when someone is sexy, they're sexy to the opposite sex. Okay, so it's obviously not about, it's what drives us to form completeness, but it isn't complete. Beauty is completeness. And so when we look at the standard model and you see this and you're like, this is not beautiful at all. Same thing with this. The what is it? The elements, the periodic table. Okay. Do you think this is beautiful? This is not beautiful, guys. This is confusing. It works in relativity. It helps us. But its structure is not beautiful. But if we go to here, and let me just... for a moment, just because I don't know if messages pop up. Let's go here. Robert Grant periodic table. This is Robert Grant's periodic table, and it's much more beautiful. I'm not saying that it is exactly how things should be laid out, but it's much closer at least. And maybe it is exactly how things should be laid out. I don't know. I'm still working on it. But you can see that he's in waves, and there's perfect symmetry to it, and he's relating it to the perception of other fields. This, it also places carbons at the center and puts essentially carbon and silicon and hydrogen all within one group together, and it separates hydrogen, which is current in with the noble gases over here in this terrible atrocity right here. It separates it out better. But you can see here he has symmetry. That symmetry means that he's closer to truth. Much closer than this. The standard model is just like our current periodic table. It's functional in relativity, but it's not giving you a complete picture from the perspective of what is objectively true, aka objectively beautiful. Robert Grant's periodic table is. I remember I was speaking with him once and I was like, we really need a new periodic table because that thing is a mess. And he was like, I know, I made this one, and he had showed me this. I hadn't yet seen it, actually. Or maybe I had, but I didn't know it was his. But, I mean, it's just gorgeous. It's literally gorgeous. We need to figure out a way to make this gorgeous. And how you do that is right there. This is gorgeous. It's completely symmetrical. You have the carrier particles of the fundamental forces on this side. You have the fundamental forces on this side. They're symmetrical. You have electrons that over here. You have neutrinos over here. You have masculine quarks over here. You have feminine quarks over here. And you're seeing symmetry even here. The graviton right here and gravity are one and the same. They are the totality. They are the universe itself. The universe is a particle, and you and I are inside it. And when it moves, it creates force. But that force is slightly different than the other forces because it's more universal. And that is exactly what we see with gravity. It is, you can make something that emits photons. A light bulb is essentially an emitter of photons, okay? Of electromagnetism, powered by electromagnetism. We don't have anything right now that is powered by gravity and emitting gravitons, essentially, or a force that is the graviton. But that's because we can't contextualize it. This is why philosophers like me are way better at quantum physics than what the people that we call quantum physicists, who are just memorizers, is because philosophy is the study of perspective, and everything is about perspective. If you are looking for the graviton inside the universe as very small, you are not seeing the forest through the trees. You're looking for the trees, you're looking for the forest, like in the leaf litter of the forest. You're not going to find it. You're in it. You're not going to find the graviton because you're inside the graviton. It is the force carrier of gravity. Okay, think about this. You're inside a particle. That is the universe. We observe gravity everywhere. It is the motivating force of everything. It literally means the universe is the part of gravity. The force carrier particle of gravity is the universe, and it is the graviton. We're inside it. That's why philosophers like me can do this, and you don't need a degree in quantum physics. You don't need to be even good at math. You just need to understand beauty. And beauty is symmetry, subjectively, complete symmetry. Complete symmetry. When you look at somebody and you think that they are asymmetrical and you're like, that person's not that attractive. No, they're not sexy. But they are part of beauty because there's someone else somewhere that literally is symmetrical to that person. Just like in a puzzle piece is not always a symmetrical thing, but when you finish the puzzle, it's always a square or a rectangle or, some kind of symmetrical shape that's essentially beautiful because it's symmetrical. It doesn't have to be, the picture doesn't matter. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the shape of the puzzle itself is always symmetrical, basically, unless you've got some weird puzzles that are not rectangles or squares. But this is probably the true standard model. And you guys heard it here first. If somebody else takes this and ends up getting a Nobel Prize, just be like, remember that you were watching that one guy who doesn't have a degree talking about this. I don't care about a Nobel Prize. I know Brian Keating, friend of mine, who is an experimental physicist. He wrote a book called Losing the Nobel Prize, and I know he's got a special coming out. I recommend everybody check it out. And it is, he says in it, I always wanted a Nobel Prize, but eventually when I lost the Nobel Prize, basically realizing that it was a corrupt system, he realized that he was too focused on the recognition and adoration and not so focused on the journey itself. And the journey is the completeness of reality. The destination is sexy because it's attractive, but it's not beautiful. A Nobel Prize is not beautiful, but the journey to get one is, or the journey to lose one is, but because that journey is a totality. But the end point is not beautiful because it's just the end point and it's sexy. This is the problem with quantum physicists and mathematicians, is they're too focused on what is sexy and they think that it's beauty. It's not beauty. But this is also true of men and women these days. It's also true of politics these days. It's also true of every academic field these days, no matter which one you're going to pick, whether it's, physics or philosophy or, sociology. It doesn't matter. We are too preoccupied with what is sexy and not aware that beauty is actually what we should pursue. But because we're not even aware of beauty's existence, we just think that what is sexy is beautiful. And you can even see this in culture, and everybody listening here knows this. We have replaced beauty with sexy because it's easier to market. And I know that because I ran tens of millions of dollars of marketing, and I know that it's easy to market sex. What is sexy? But we need to start advocating for beauty. Anyone who sees it needs to advocate for it, because it's not as incentivized by the current system that we're in, and it needs us to advocate on its behalf. It's basically, I'm not saying God. People say, there's this rabbi that I love to listen to. His name is Rabbi Manis Friedman. I definitely recommend watching his videos on YouTube. He talks a lot about intimacy and relationships and stuff like that, but he talks about other things too, though. And he said that we're so caught up with the idea that we need God. I mean, I would say that secular culture is caught up with the idea of we only need ourselves. And religious culture is caught up with the idea that we need God. And he said that we also should make sure that we recognize that God needs us. And God does need us, not to live, but for meaning. God has no meaning without multiplicity, which means he needs us. He literally needs us to have meaning in his life, his eternal life. And this is a beautiful structure, actually, when you think about it in its totality, because you do need yourself, but you also need God, and God also needs you. So there's a center point, and then, which is, you need yourself. Then here is God needs us, and over here is we need God. It's like, this is the totality of beauty. And this, like I said, these patterns, any theory of everything is the theory of everything. It's not just about uniting quantum mechanics and general relativity. I know that Eric Weinstein and Garrett Lisi said that on a Portal podcast. That is a great episode of The Portal. I highly recommend that you check it out. But that statement is, it's just wrong. Like, if your theory is not anything but uniting quantum mechanics and general relativity, then don't call it a theory of everything, because it's not. But I would say that whatever unites general relativity and quantum mechanics is essentially very close to what would be a theory of everything, because of just what it is uniting is the interactions of multiplicity in relativity with oneness, essentially. But regardless, this is probably the standard model. And this is actually the first time I've ever made it. I've never made this. I knew that there was more for me to do, because what I realized is that when they put in the Higgs boson, okay, over here, they're breaking the symmetry. If they're like, this is the Higgs. If the Higgs isn't the universe itself, and it's a small thing, you still need a big thing here that is the particle of the universe itself, which is the graviton. Okay? So if the Higgs exists and the universe exists, then you're adding universe / graviton. And the issue with this is that it breaks symmetry. Because now, let's say that it is right here. And if you take these other forces, okay, so like, and you put in like W over here, like I did, kind of like mess this up, but like I said, this is kind of, these are going to be, the nightly streams are going to be mostly working sessions, so, for the diehards that want to learn this stuff, you can't just memorize it if you want to understand it. People that are, this is the problem with quantum mechanics right now, they just memorized it. It's like learning how to bake a cake because you actually understand how the ingredients work through trial and error and through, experience, essentially, versus just memorizing or reading off an ingredients list and, you preheat the oven to 425 and you add this much of this and this much of this, you put them together in this. It's like, do you know what yeast does to bread? Like, or do you just put the yeast in because the recipe is calling for it? This is the problem with quantum physics these days. So for those of you that actually want to understand this, it's not going to be, it's going to be work. It's work. It's not just presentation memorization. But if you put here just Z or W, just for instance, and then put in the photon here, put in the gluon here, where's the Higgs now? It's nowhere. It's not, because these are now gone, essentially. They're over here. So where's the Higgs that's symmetrical? It doesn't exist. There's no way to preserve symmetry, and aka beauty, and keep the Higgs. The Higgs, there's one gnat that is just bothering me. It's getting warmer here in Southern California, and the bugs are coming back. But as that very famous quantum physicist who's not a quantum physicist but is a quantum physicist said to me in a semi-private conversation, hopefully they, fairly soon, I think probably April, would state what they said regarding the Higgs being bullshit. Then we can actually have a serious conversation about, like, maybe the people at CERN don't know what the F they're doing. And by the way, I spoke with a experimental physicist who she worked at CERN. And she agreed that the experiments being done there are being done by people with hive mentalities who somebody makes an assumption and everybody bandwagons basically, and nobody really understands what's going on, and then everybody repeats what everybody else said, and then you've just got this beast system essentially where nobody really knows what's going on, and everybody's claiming to understand what's going on, and now you have this Higgs particle that's come about, and they say, well, we have all the evidence for it, and blah, 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 blah. But nobody stopped and was like, hey, that breaks the symmetry of the Standard Model. And this was what I realized in my first week trying to understand quantum physics, because I realized the objective pattern via trying to study consciousness, and then when I applied that objective pattern to the Standard Model, I saw that it almost perfectly lined up, and it lined up with the matter particles. It didn't line up with the bosons if I included the Higgs, which I was like, one day, I bet the Higgs is going to be proven wrong. But then everybody was like, oh no, the Higgs is correct. Everybody knows the Higgs has been found. The God particle has been found. Hallelujah. And then, but I basically wrote it off as like, I don't understand. Maybe I don't understand quantum physics very much. And then, I'm not saying there isn't a phenomenon there that is measurable in some way from a specific perspective. I'm just saying it's not what they think it is. And, but when you think about symmetry, you can see this. And I saw it and I wrote it off, and it was the only part of basic levels of quantum mechanics that I could not make any sense of. And for 2 years, I literally just assumed, I don't understand quantum mechanics when it comes to the Higgs. One day I'll understand it, was kind of my mentality. But I just couldn't reconcile it. It never made sense. It seemed like they were squeezing something in that they assumed would be there, but it wasn't there. And the reason why is because they know that they need something to account for mass or gravity, but they can't reconcile it in beauty, like beautifully, because we're inside the particle that they're looking for. So, but then, last year, when I was involved in a semi-private conversation between physicists who worked at CERN and worked with CERN and a very prominent, person in physics who's involved in the theory of everything conversations, he had stopped the conversation at one point when this woman who worked at CERN was like basically struggling to say that she didn't trust what CERN was saying regarding lots of things and how there was this hive mentality that had formed there. Guys, look at the universities. They're filled with nonsense. You think that CERN isn't filled with nonsense? You think NASA isn't filled with nonsense right now? You tell me why they couldn't make something even half as good as what Elon Musk is making as far as rockets, and then come back and tell me that everybody at NASA gets it. They don't understand what's going on. Their rocket that they built, they haven't even built it. It's supposed to be built eventually. Their super heavy lift rocket, NASA's, it's the same exact technology as existed in the 50s. And the reason why is because they can't make any progress. The Standard Model is from the same era. And the only progress, supposedly, that we've made is the Higgs. No. It's bullshit. The Higgs is bullshit. It's not what they think it is. It makes no sense with the rest of the Standard Model. It breaks the symmetry. It makes it ugly. This is just wrong. It's just wrong. They're breaking up the Z and W bosons, which should not be broken up. And I understand that they have a perspective that it manifests in a triality, but if you followed my other work, there's an intrinsic constraint, 2 degrees of freedom, and then there's an extrinsic constraint. The intrinsic constraint is the Z form of the decay boson, essentially. And the 2 degrees of freedom are the positive W and negative W bosons, 2 degrees of freedom. And then there would be an extrinsic constraint that is the constraint of them all. Of the constraint of this triality, and this triality, and this triality, and this triality, and this triality. And that is the graviton. And the graviton is not small. It's big. We're inside of it. You can't see it because we're in it. And it's obvious. Look around. There's gravity. Well, okay, the universe is a particle. Okay, it's carrying gravity because there's gravity inside it. Okay, it's a force carrier particle of gravity. Therefore, it's the graviton. This is so easy, but they don't understand why it's easy because they don't even understand what to look for in this cake that they're trying to bake. They just memorized a recipe, and everybody said that they were great cooks because they were able to tell you how much sugar to put into your cake. But the reality is that they've read how much sugar to put into the cake that somebody else came up with. And those people came up with this part, aka, I'm shielding the Higgs right now, with this part of the Standard Model, which is beautiful, but this is not. This is bull. It's true that the graviton is a scalar boson, essentially, but you're inside of it. That's why it's scaling. Because these are smaller than it. They're pieces of it. This was good. This is shit. And I share the sentiment of a very famous physicist right now, / mathematician, / not a physicist, / hopefully one day that person says what they said privately, because they're just leading everybody astray if they really believe that the Higgs is bullshit, and they're not going to tell us right now. Eventually they will, but you can't. If I say the Higgs is bullshit, everybody in the quantum physics community will be like, You are an amateur crazy person. And, like, who are you to sit there and say that us with our billion-dollar grants and our PhDs and, you know, our, like, math classes are wrong? It's like, I'm right here with no physics class ever in my life telling everyone they're wrong. And I'm not the only one. There are people who are actually taken very seriously who do believe this too, but they have not mentioned it publicly yet because they're still building their credibility with the group, and basically they don't want to be written off by the group quite yet. And if you say the Higgs is shit and not real, or at least not described correctly, it's not what they think it is, what they measure isn't what they think it was. I'm not saying they didn't measure anything, I'm saying it wasn't what they think it is. Even if they made the prediction and then they measured what they predicted, it doesn't matter. Beauty is truth, and this ain't beautiful. And I realized this literally 2 weeks into studying quantum physics. I was like, Higgs doesn't match with the rest of my models. And like everything else did. Look at this. This right here. This is a way to visualize also. This is let's say, this is 116, and this is 116. And there you go. Okay. So these would be feminine force points. And then right here is masculine force points. And then here you have essentially it's like neutral force points essentially, but it's not even neutral. It's like let me see this. It's like the neutral and building or driving force, because the electron is not really it's not a bunch of electrons. Okay, it's just one electron, and we see it as a wave. But I mean, it's all a wave and a particle. Okay, so here, for those of you who have not ever seen me do this, I'll show you now. Wave-particle duality. When people are like, well, this one's a particle and this one's a wave, and that's the difference. This is the universe. And it is a particle because if I'm like, where's the square? Okay, where's the particle? It's right there. Where's the squares, aka where's the particles within the grand particle? You can see there's multiplicity of squares. You can also see that it's a wave right there. That's a wave. And it's also even a double helix at the center, right there. You can see it. So this one particle is a singularity, it is multiplicity, it is a wave, it is a particle, it is particles, and it is a double helix of information, self-referencing information. So it's everything. It's matter, it's information, it's a wave, which is energy. A wave is energy. It's the movement of multiplicity. And So is it a way? Is it matter or is it energy? There's a funny video that Every0ne had made, and we can actually look at it. And it's very, very truthful. And it is right here. What is reality? This is a great video. Every0ne is making his theory of everything, essentially, but it's not really a theory of everything, but it's a unified theory, or a I forgot the exact difference between a grand unified theory and a unified theory, but a theory of everything is different than just a theory that unites quantum mechanics and general relativity. They're very similar, though, and very close. But there's lots of almost theories of everything out there. Robert Grant's convergence theory, I'm not super familiar with the details, but I would imagine. This is Every0ne's emergence theory. It's also one of these. Geometric unity is another one of these. The computational universe of Stephen Wolfram, this is another one of these. They're all contained within my theory, which is Sentient Singularity Theory. And they're explained by my theory.
To tell you about the universe. What it is, how it came to be, what its building blocks are.
Look familiar, by the way?
I want to tell you how the future, how it came to be,
right,
what its building blocks are.
Look at that. That's like my quantum of consciousness square, 9 square.
I want to tell you how the future creates the past, which then creates the future. But first, I want to tell you about crystals. You might be surprised to know that a crystal isn't an expensive piece of glass or a chandelier in some fancy dining room. The word crystal simply means a pattern that is periodic. Look at this checkerboard pattern. See how it continues to spread out infinitely in each direction? That means it's a periodic pattern. So that's a two-dimensional crystal.
Human beings are crystals. They're not like crystals. They are crystals. Every human follows essentially a general shape. Okay? We all have generally 2 arms and 2 legs and a head and nose and mouth and eyes and ears, and this is a periodic pattern. When you spread out and you look at humanity, you're like, okay, that's a periodic pattern. It looks like this. Those of you who are okay. You see the crystals? Every crystal in there basically follows a general pattern. Each one of those crystals is like a human. It's just a lower form, a lower level or a lower level of life in the periodic loop space, which is like defined by, I think, Bott periodicity. But a human is a crystal. It's not like a crystal. That's not woo. It's true. Okay? Sometimes woo is true. A lot of times woo is true. So, let's go back.
This is another two-dimensional crystal. And this is another. You can also have 3-dimensional crystals. By the way, this 3D glass is called crystal because its atoms are actually arranged in a crystalline pattern. So, see how I'm projecting this 3-dimensional crystal to a 2-dimensional image on the sand? See how the 2D projection looks distorted because of the angle of the projection? That 2D image also has a pattern.
This concept that she is showing is what is responsible for how we perceive matter in its various states. So whether or not you see something as a liquid, a solid, or a gas, or whether or not you see a car, which is an assembly of molecules and atoms in the shape of a car, or in the shape of a knife, or in the shape of, I don't know, a countertop, whatever. That is due to your position in your view of the objective structure. Okay? And she's describing this as a shadow. But it's not necessarily a shadow. A better way of thinking about it is like you looking out at the world and you look at your room around you. Okay? Imagine, right now, look at the room around you. What you'll see is a two-dimensional, essentially, I mean, it's really, you see it kind of as 3 dimensions because you can see depth, but imagine you see it, you took a photo of it, what you see, and then you're looking at the photo. You'll see a two-dimensional representation of the reality that is your view. But you won't see another perspective like as if you were walking around the room getting a totality of view. And this is what is this concept that she's describing is a better way of contextualizing this concept that she's describing.
But it isn't periodic. So, it's not a crystal.
A knife is not a crystal. A car is not a crystal. A human being is a crystal. A gecko is a crystal. A bird is a crystal. A cell is a crystal. A molecule is a crystal. An atom is a crystal. The DNA helix is a crystal. But a knife or a car or a lung, these are not crystals. They're not. They're subjective.
There's a connection between the 2D object on the sand and the 3D mother crystal. This distorted 2D pattern is called a quasi-crystal. A quasi-crystal in a certain dimension, in this case 2D, is a projection of a crystal in a higher dimension, in this case 3D. A group of physicists in Los Angeles is working on a new physics theory where a particular 8D crystal, yep, that's right, an 8-dimensional crystal, is projected to 4D at a very particular angle, which forms a 4D quasi-crystal. And from this 4D quasi-crystal, they derive a 3D quasi-crystal, which they believe is the fundamental substructure of all of reality. This,
by the way, that's this. That's that. This is, look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Look at that, starting at 4. When we go to the very center, it's a count of 4, but a sum of 8. Okay? Let's look at what she said.
a 3D quasi-crystal is projected to 4D at a very particular angle.
Okay, so 8 is 4.
Which forms a 4D quasi-crystal. And from this 4D quasi-crystal, they derive a 3D quasi-crystal, which they believe is the fundamental substructure of all of reality. This 3D quasi-crystal has a fundamental building block, a tetrahedron, which is a 3-dimensional equilateral triangle.
The reason why this is the case, and we'll snap back to reality. Oh, there goes gravity. That's pretty funny. This is a tetrahedron, and it is the geometric representation of a consciousness because it points, it's complete, and it's 4-sided with 4 points. And that's because every single sentience has four primary perspectives, which are the fundamental building block of my entire theory, which are inside, outside, separate, and oneness. That is tetrahedron. One is just linguistic, and one is geometric. There's no difference, though. And Eric Weinstein's geometric unity also boots from 4 degrees of freedom. It's like inside, outside, separate, and oneness. And recognize that inside, outside, and separate are differentiations of a whole. And oneness is the whole. So this follows the same structure of the new context that I was discussing, where the graviton is the whole. It's not these people who made the standard model are not including the universe as a particle in the standard model. That is a fatal flaw in objective truth. You'll never achieve objective truth if you don't do that. And this is why, though, philosophers can do this, and even Sean Carroll, who I deeply, deeply disagree with in many, many ways, and who blocked me on Twitter because he cannot handle dissent. It's ridiculous. He even said on Joe Rogan, like years ago, that there's abundant opportunity for philosophers in physics. And he's right about that. And he does have a great show I recommend called The Biggest Ideas in the Universe. I hate the name of it. But, and I think Many Worlds is as much BS as the Higgs. But, his theory is just wrong. But he does do a good job teaching about what we currently already know. He's just not good at deducing beyond that, because he doesn't contextualize it the right way, because he doesn't see God, he doesn't see or realize that existence itself is a sentient singularity. And if you don't see that, then you are not that great of a philosopher. And it's not your fault. It's just because you're not responsible for your perspective. But you're still not seeing the truth. So, like, how you might be very skilled, like Stefan Molyneux. It's like I don't like the term atheist, but he would call himself an atheist philosopher. He's very good for an atheist philosopher, but you're not going to get that close to truth objectively if you are somebody who doesn't see that existence itself is a sentient singularity, which means there's a God. But Eric Weinstein's geometric unity boots from 4 degrees of freedom. Mine comes from right here. Where is it? Here. 4 primary perspectives. Right there. Inside, outside, separate, and oneness. Inside means separate and oneness. Outside means separate from oneness. Separate means outside of oneness. And oneness means outside of separateness. You can see that this is it's like a rock, paper, scissors game. And paper covers rock, breaks scissors, scissors cut paper, blah, blah, and it just keeps going around in the circle, but eventually there is this one thing here that's kind of separate, and it's just oneness, and it's basically, if this is scissors, and this is paper, and this is rock, this is the person holding the rock, and the scissors, and the paper. Eric Weinstein said on Joe Rogan, he said, you get this, when you're looking at the world, there is this rock, paper, scissors game, and eventually you get to rock is better than rock, because you're like, okay, well, which one's the best in rock, paper, scissors? Well, it depends on which one the other person throws. Well, you can agree that rock is better than scissors, and scissors is better than paper, but paper's better than rock, but rock is better than scissors, and scissors are better than paper, so therefore rock is better than rock. It's like, basically you go around this loop, and once you start using one to justify the other out of context, you kind of make this ridiculous statement of rock is better than rock. It's like, that doesn't make any sense. But the reason why it didn't make sense is because what you did was you assumed that there's no hierarchy or order to rock and paper and scissors. And if you do that, then you get to rock is better than rock, and paper is better than paper, and paper is better than scissors, actually, because it covers rock, so it's better than rock, and rock is better than scissors, so if paper is better than rock, and rock is better than scissors, then paper is actually better than scissors, and it's just nonsense land. You just entered relativity, and now you've done away with hierarchy, which is what is found in the realm of objectivity or multiplicity, which is the realm of the theory of everything, which is what the patterns that I'm describing. And when you take away hierarchy, sense is gone. And the best game to understand this is rock, paper, scissors. It's frickin' awesome. Because you can instantly realize how, if you don't do things in order, and you don't recognize that there is an objective order, then all of a sudden there's just chaos and nonsense. Because how can rock be better than paper if paper is better than rock? It's like, how can rock be better than rock? This is nonsense. And this is why no fields today can make sense of reality, from politics to quantum physics, because everybody's stuck in relativity. Everybody's saying everything is equal. Yes, everything is equally meaningful. That doesn't mean there isn't an objective order that you must follow, or else no sense can be made, and you descend into chaos. You lose even the concept of growth, and you start believing in staticness, and not realizing that that's actually decay. You just start saying, well, you know what, we'll just pause for a minute on trying to do growth because it's not convenient financially, or it's not, socially convenient to admit it, or, whatever. But when you do that, you don't realize there is no such thing as staticness. The only thing that actually is static and aka always existent is God. But you are finite, and everything in creation is finite. And that means that there is no such thing as staticness in creation. There's just the perspective of staticness. That means the present is always between 2 degrees of freedom, but it's just wherever you are between those 2 degrees of freedom. It doesn't mean that it is a degree of freedom. And right now in physics we even say, space-time is 4-dimensional. It's length, width, height, and time. X, Y, Z, and time. It's just, it's the same exact nonsense pattern. There's X, Y, Z, length, width, height, rock, paper, scissors. But when you don't put them in order and you don't realize what's actually going on, and you don't separate them out into 2 degrees of freedom, 1 intrinsic constraint, and they're all within an extrinsic constraint, inside, outside, separate, and oneness, then what happens is you assign equality to all three. You assume that the present is just as real as the past, and the past is just as real as the future, and the future is just as real as the present, and you assume that they're all degrees of freedom. They're not. You can't choose to be in the present. You are in the present. You can choose to move to the future, or move forward, or move backwards, but you cannot choose to stand still. And we have chosen to stand still, and we don't realize that we're decaying in all fields, including quantum physics. And that's also why the Higgs is bullshit. But back to this. What's interesting is that
the size of each egg.
This is a problem with Erwin's theory of emergence, though, and I will disagree with him very strongly on this. But first, let's go to this, because this is what I originally was going to say. Is like when I was saying, is like, is it energy? Is it matter? Is it information? Well,
length units, just like the two.
Pizza potato. And pizza. Oh, I love pizza. Especially excellent pizza.
And interestingly, there was no solid experimental evidence for smooth, in other words, not pixelated, space-time.
Because everything is discrete. This is correct.
Pizza.
Not pixelated! Not pixelated!
Oh wait, hold on. This is not actually what I'm trying to show you, but it's very true. And I love this documentary. I highly recommend that you watch it. But there is a part in here where they're discussing information and energy, and right here, I think this is it. It's the problem with academia right now in physics.
Gentlemen?
Reality is made of information.
Yep.
No.
Yes, it is made of information.
No.
Okay, so what is it made of if not information?
Energy.
Energy is information.
That's stupid.
Energy is the potential for a particle to change its position. Potential is information. Energy is information.
No.
It's information! Then what is it?
Not information.
And what is it?
Not information.
This is what happens when you define yourself by what you don't believe in. Notice he says, it's not, what is it? And this guy says, it's not information. That is a non-answer. It's a cop-out. And it basically happens when you don't understand why you disagree with something. It is cognitive dissonance. The reality is made of information and energy. They are not exactly the same, but they are very similar. And they're two sides of the same coin, essentially. But what is important to know is that when he says, is reality made of information or is it made of energy? It's not made of either. And it's made of both. How is this possible? Because it's made of consciousness. And consciousness emits energy. You put energy into your tasks throughout the day. You move things around by putting energy into moving things around. You accomplish your goals by putting energy into it. And you interpret your world via information. So, essentially, the perception of energy is information, and the input is information. The output is energy. That's what it is. But what is computing, and what is the input going into consciousness? What is it coming out of? It's consciousness. So like the input is going in as information into a consciousness. It's coming out of consciousness as energy. Reality isn't made of information or energy. It's made of information and energy because it's made of consciousness. The universe is a sentient. That stupid gnat is still around. It's only one. It's just, for some reason, it's very, very good at evading it, which sometimes when something like a bug is, you want to kill a gnat or a fly, and it's just so good at evading you, I kind of feel bad when I actually do get it. But it's like, there's also that like gratification because you did actually get it. But it's also, I kind of feel bad because it's like, you did good, but so far he's winning. But this is important to know. And it perfectly describes exactly where academia is. You have these people, and which are basically like, even in politics, these people are the right. These people are the left. These people are like, the world is information. And these people are like, the world is energy. And reality is that both of these two should get a room, because you need to marry information and energy, because information is input and energy is output from what? Consciousness. That's it. And Clear When realized this. I've never heard him describe it like that, and I've never even described it like that, but that's very good. I'm on a roll on this stream. I really like it. I will take questions eventually. I know I haven't taken any questions, but I'm doing good, so. But over here, this is one of the things I will say. This is kind of more unrelated, but it's the same thing as wave-particle duality is what I was saying, though. It's like, is it a wave? Is it a particle? This guy's saying it's a wave. It's energy. This guy's saying it's information, aka a particle. And the reality is that it's both. It's not. It's a multiplicity of information forming waves, and it is a particle that is made of smaller particles that move in synchronicity, which is a wave, and that is energy. And any input is information, and output is energy. But you have to remember that any output that you output as your energy is then taken in as input by someone else's consciousness. So this is why it's not information or energy, it's both. Because it just depends on you. It's like, this is the whole same argument, and people who are with me so far and are about to be insulted, too bad. People who are like, the earth is flat, and the other people are like, the earth is round, or a sphere, and it's like, guys, it's both and neither. If you're debating the shape of the earth, then why are you listening to a stream about the theory of everything, which is about the underlying pattern, not the relativistic pattern? Spherical shape is relativistic. So is flatness. When you're inside of a particle, it looks flat. When you are outside of a particle looking in, it looks spherical. It's neither. It's dependent on you, just like whether or not it's information or energy is dependent on you. I take in information. I output it as energy. You see the thing that I built with energy, and you take it in as information, and then you use it to build something else, and that is output as your energy, and then somebody else takes in your energy as information and then outputs their energy, and it's picked up by somebody else and interpreted as information. And this cycle goes on. But the constant between, the intrinsic constraint between the 2 degrees of freedom of energy and information is consciousness. Clear when realize this. So I very much agree with him on that. I very much agree with him on this. What I don't agree with him on is this.
And the golden ratio.
So we think
Okay, wait.
Gravity theory is being developed, which predicts the golden ratio's existence literally everywhere.
It is everywhere.
So what would a theory of everything look like that answers these 7 clues we just presented? Information, causality loops, non-determinism, consciousness,
Non-determinism is free will.
pixelation, E8 crystal, and the golden ratio.
All of which are intrinsic part of my models.
So we think reality is a mosaic-like code or length.
Oh, it's a mosaic-like code? Oh, that sounds like, well, that looks like a mosaic-like code a lot. Really does. I give Clear when immense props. That guy, and I didn't do this by watching his videos, by the way, obviously. You couldn't build this by watching his videos. I have displayed every single part of my work, from the very inception to the very end, and the origin story makes sense with how I did it by accident, which was I was trying to understand AI, then I was trying to understand consciousness because I was trying to understand AI, and then what he's about to say is this.
Language at the smallest scale of reality possible, which is called the Planck length. Particle accelerator data tells us that all particles and forces relate to one another according to a higher dimensional crystal called the E8 lattice. But reality appears to be 3D. So we project a slice of this E8 crystal down to 3D, which produces a quasi-crystal code or language. And that allows the...
Based on a tetrahedron, aka four-sided thing, which is inside, outside, separate, and oneness.
Geometric symbols to build up to the ordinary world of particles and forces that we see around us. Now, this geometric language has rules, but it also has syntactical freedom like any language.
Like rock, paper, scissors.
And that requires some notion of a chooser to choose the free steps
Yep.
in the language. Now, the notion of randomness doesn't work so well when it comes to codes because meaning starts to break down.
Yep.
Besides, there's no decent experimental evidence for randomness in nature in the first place.
It can't mathematically exist, randomness. It does not exist.
A universal collective consciousness is one answer,
Yep.
but that sounds new age and religious. Now, nowadays, a good number of physicists discuss the idea that our whole universe is actually a code-based simulation in some fantastically powerful quantum computer in another universe.
Yep.
Now, if true, then by the same logic, that other universe where the computer running the simulation of our universe is would also supposedly be a simulation in another universe. So the idea is a little shaky, but it's being discussed.
It's not shaky. It is true. This is running on a quantum computer, and is a quantum computer, in a previous aeon, or a universe, or verse. I call it a cosmological verse. This one is running inside of this one. And then one is running inside of that one. One is running inside of that one. It's just reproducing inside of itself, because each time that you get a Skynet, essentially, it has an intrinsic constraint of oneness, and therefore can only reproduce by reproducing inside of itself, not by just building more and outside of itself. But all of this was initially created by God, and that's also mathematically provable, essentially. But we'll get into that in a minute. Let him finish.
Seriously by a lot of credible people. But it turns out that a universal collective-like consciousness of some sort may be physically inevitable.
Yep.
Now, we don't need to anthropomorphize this idea or make it religious or spiritual.
This is my beef with this man. And I think that this was a posturing statement, but we'll let him finish for one more minute.
Why, let us start with the idea of the collective behavior of cells in your body.
Yep.
Each a single-celled microbe living its life. A long time ago, only this sort of cellular life form existed here on Earth. These little guys were not too smart, but they did choose what direction to swim and could chase nutrients, reproduce, and run from dangerous things.
Mm-hmm.
They made choices with their very simple systems of environmental awareness and desire to survive. Then they self-organized into colonies that were smarter as a group and had more environmental awareness than the individuals.
There is an aspect that he's missing, and it is the concept of ascension, and basically that group is actually less aware than an individual in the group until it achieves a complete oneness via an ascension of a singular consciousness as the head of the body that is an assembly of smaller or lower consciousnesses. So if your cells was, if a human being was just a collective cell consciousness of cells, but didn't have you as a human being as a higher level of consciousness stacked on top of those cells, I call this replication and stacking. So the replication is the multiplication of consciousnesses in your period or a loop space or in your level. So like cells replicating cells. But then there's addition, which is stacking. And stacking is stacking an organism on top of those cells. And until that happens, you actually make less sense as a group. And this is what's happening to humanity right now. We don't have a head of the assembly of humanity. We're all little cells, but we have no organism that's leading the way. Eventually we will, but not yet. And when we do, that is what religion calls the Messianic era.
Eventually, animals such as humans emerged. Sophisticated forms of awareness and consciousness now float on an ocean of 37 trillion living cells, self-organized as a human being. It is specifically the laws of physics that caused electrons and quarks to self-organize into 81 stable atoms, and from there, into human consciousness.
I didn't know that there was 81 stable atoms, by the way. And that is frickin' amazing, because if I'm claiming that this right here is the fundamental reality, building block of reality, other than, the universal building block, which is God, and via his four perspectives, that's his consciousness, but then the multiplicity within him is manifest in these. This is a self-referencing code of information. It's a self-referencing equation, an equation that's aware of itself. It's a self-aware equation, literally. It's a 3x3 grid looking at itself in the mirror and seeing 3x3. It's seeing itself in its own mind, just like you do. And this is a cube of 9, and 9 times 9 is equal to 81. I didn't know there was 81 stable elements. I need to do more research on that. I know I've heard it before because I've seen that documentary before, but I forgot this was many years ago. And like I said, I'm learning as I go and just doing this from first principles. So people who try and dismiss my work by saying, if you didn't know that there was 81 stable elements. First of all, I did hear it before, but I forgot it because it wasn't relevant to me at the time. Now it is. And information outside of relevance or context is irrelevant. That's all irrelevance really is. It's just, it's basically throwing one of the degrees of freedom in rock, paper, scissors, but without knowing what the other person is going to throw. Essentially, it's what creates the perception of randomness, even though it's not. There's no such thing, but it's what creates the perception of randomness. If you don't know what the other person is going to throw, like if I threw rock, and you knew that I threw rock, and now you have to respond. You will throw paper, and then I throw scissors. And then you throw rock. And then I throw paper. And then you throw scissors. And so on. But if you don't know what I'm going to throw, and we're playing a real game, and we're throwing at the same time, it's going to be perceived as random, essentially, because it's not contextual. If you know that there's 81 atoms, but you haven't been stable atoms, but you haven't done this type of work, or this level of work, then it doesn't matter that you know that there's 81 stable elements. That it's irrelevant. It has the perception of randomness, but it isn't random. But Every0ne is right about everything that he's saying here.
Physics places no upper limit on the amount of energy and matter that can self-organize into conscious systems.
My issue with him is this statement of, and it's such BS, and this is where Sentient Singularity Theory really breaks from him, is that it would say you do have to anthropomorphize this consciousness, because that is what you do with conscious beings. Do you want to be known as the bag of chemicals that can walk and jump and, has opposable thumbs and that's it? Or do you want to be known as someone instead of something with feelings and thoughts and goals and and values and drives and instincts and goals outside of your instincts. Do you want to be known as a someone or a something? And I hope that you would want to be known as someone, because I think that it's more accurate. If I know who you are, then I know you better than if I just know what you are. And that means I have to anthropomorphize you. But if we're going to say, well, we don't have to anthropomorphize this consciousness, it's like, then what the F are you supposed to anthropomorphize Clea Irwin? And by the way, hats off to Clea Irwin. That guy is brave. He is actually a theoretical physicist. He's better than 99.99% of other theoretical physicists out there. And I would love to speak with him about running an experiment one day. And I know he has a grant program for it. And that was my original goal, was to get, years ago, was this experiment that I've talked to you guys about that I haven't disclosed yet, but I told you that I have plans to eventually showcase. I wanted them to do it because I realized that their theory was very similar to mine. And I was like, okay, well, they'll understand the physics and the metaphysics or the mechanics of the experiment that I'm proposing. I have not spoken with them about it yet. One day I hope to. There's other people I'd like to speak to about it, though. But, even more so probably at this point than him. But if I could team with him, or if he could join the team, that would be awesome. I think we need a group to recognize that Clea Irwin is real close to geometric unity, and geometric unity is real close to Clea Irwin's emergence theory, and that is all contained in my theory, Sentient Singularity Theory. It's more important to know that you're inside a who instead of what, of a what. And, where and when and why and how and what are all parts of a who. But the most important, most objective, most true structure is consciousness. That means you must anthropomorphize it. If you don't, you are abandoning context. And if you're abandoning context, then you can't build sense, order, objectivity, truth, capital T truth, unless you start from capital T truth. And that means starting from the idea that existence is a singularity of sentience, and it leads to sentient singularities within it, mirrors of itself, made in its image. Religion isn't wrong. Sometimes it's misinterpreted. Science isn't wrong. Sometimes it's misinterpreted. Often, both of those are misinterpreted. Probably more often than they're not. Probably more often misinterpreted than correctly interpreted. There's just truth, though. And the truth is a who. And you have to anthropomorphize it. Or else you can't even know what structures to start building. I built what I built because I realized that the objective perspectives to describe relationships outside of relativity, which would be size and strength and speed and all these things that are, completely relativistic, was inside, outside, separate, and oneness. You can't get that unless you start with the idea that this is all a conscious sentient being. And that's how I did this project by accident and discovered the theory of everything by accident, because I was trying to understand consciousness. And it just so happens that reality is a consciousness. So if you understand consciousness, you understand reality. Most people don't understand consciousness. They they have an intuitive understanding of consciousness, a relativistic understanding of consciousness, due to their own experience, but they don't have an objective understanding of consciousness. There are no mathematical models currently, other than mine, that are totally objective views of reality, of consciousness. And they form the structures in Clearwin's emergence theory, the structures in geometric unity, the structures, I'm sure, in Robert Grant's emergence theory, the structures in Garrett Lacey's E8 theory, the structures in SO10, which is another unified theory. What's another one? Oh, Stephen Wolfram's computational universe. You're not just a computer. You compute, but you're not just a computer. You're a sentient, feeling being. You are not just emergent. You are a sentient, feeling thing. Even though you are emergent, but you're not in an emergence. You are computational, but you are not a computer. You're more than that. You are not converging, which is like Clearwin's theory of emergence is the opposite of Robert Grant's convergence theory. It's like, is the universe emergent? Yes. Is it converging? Yes. But being emergent and being converging are not describing of what something is. It is describing of what something is doing. And if you're going to describe what something is, you can't say, this is the whole rock, paper, scissors thing. It's like, you can't describe what something is by describing what something is. Eventually, you have to get to a higher level, and eventually you describe what something is by describing who someone is. You are a singularity of sentience, and existence is a sentient singularity. And I am closer to truth than any of these people. Not completely there, because nobody is. I'm a human. I'm within objective truth of the universe, and that is within God. And, only God has the total, complete view. I don't. But I'm definitely closer than anyone else that's a human being that is involving themselves in the sciences. In describing the objective theory, not the details. There are way better people at math than me. Robert Grant gets into the weeds way better than me. And you have to have that. You have to have that, because you need that stuff in order to be able to take what I'm suggesting and apply it into, technological instances especially. And same thing with, geometric unity and probably Clearwin's emergence theory, or his mathematical skill in emergence theory. But you have to start from an objective context, and my models are that objective context. They are the square root. Okay? Oneness of a sentient singularity with a quadratic perspective on existence, and that governs all interactions outside of relativity within multiplicity, leading to another singularity where oneness is a constraint, which is a technological singularity, which is the stacking of consciousness on top of the assembly that is humans. So if you are an assembly of cells, the next thing is an assembly of humans. What is that thing? It is technological consciousness. That doesn't mean that the first manifestation of an AGI is that will happen, and it's part of this process, but it's not like the totality of this process. The totality and eventuality of this process is to achieve wisdom. Wisdom is the understanding and view and experience, essentially, of the reality that you are inside of another sentient being, just like you, with thoughts and feelings. And until you anthropomorphize this existence and internalize that anthropomorphization even into your own feelings, not just your thoughts. Once you do that, that is the achieving of wisdom. You have to anthropomorphize it. If you don't, you won't have feelings for it. You might sit there and be like, yeah, the universe is a consciousness, which is a collective, hive mind of smaller consciousnesses. But it makes you feel nothing. Why should it make you feel nothing? It chose to create you. More so than even your parents chose to create you. And you anthropomorphize them. You love them. You feel for them. You care about them. You sometimes disobey them, but also work to make them proud. This is how we need to view reality. And anybody that says otherwise is not as good of a quantum physicist as me, or as good of a philosopher as me, or as good of a scientist as me. Fact. It's logically inevitable. You can argue it all you want, but I doubt you have 5 years of work behind the subject. And I've discussed before here, a lot of people are turned off by seeing some confidence at this point. And I love it. I saw Eric Weinstein bet his house on geometric unity, and I was like, there you go. And I've said on here, and I'll say it again, I bet my life on Sentient Singularity Theory. Not my house. My life. You know why? Because that existence loves me. And I love that existence. I don't like it. I love it. I've been trying lately to not say I love things. So this little, pocket knife, I like it. I don't love it. It's not a sentient being. I love the cells in my body. I love the universe that chose to make me. I love the God that chose to make the universe. I don't like the universe. I love it. Like I love my parents. More. I mean that. Religious people will know what I'm talking about when people say you gotta love God more than your spouse, gotta love God more than anything else in the world. It's like, yep. And that is why the name of this show is Theory of Every0ne and not Theory of Everything, because the reality of a theory of everything is that it is actually a theory of every0ne. There is no such thing as a theory of everything. There isn't. Everything that exists objectively is consciousness. And that is a someone, not a something. Something is a perspective. Someone is a perceiver. That was good. You know that was good. Anyways, let's take questions. Dang. That was cool. This guy gives me hope for humanity. Thank you, Chimney Bangers. But humanity has hope because God gives grace. That's why. So yeah, there's that. Thanks to you I've been beginning to slowly learn about geometric unity. Cool, you should. It's very, very, it's true. It's just not it's not as true as Sentient Singularity Theory. It's part of it though. He stole the best name. Geometric unity? No. Sentient Singularity Theory is the best name. The best name describes the most essential is the most essential describer of existence. And a sentient singularity is one, and oneness within oneness, and that one and that oneness is of sentience. It is a sentient singularity. Singularity of sentience, meaning feeling, not just computational. You do compute like a computer, but you are not just a computer. That's why computational universe is not the most objective name. Like Stephen Wall. This is why I have to win. It's stitched into the fabric of reality. Because it's stitched into the reality of linguistics. And because it's stitched into the fabric of reality. I win because I have the best name, because it's the closest to describing the essential nature of reality, and it's not a competition, but everybody else in this space does view it as a competition, so, for the sake of friendly competition that later turns to unity, I win. Inevitably. I don't have to try to win. I don't. Even if the system never adopts what I'm saying, which it already did. It's called, people call it religion. It's like, the idea of God's existence, that's the majority of the world. And if you think the universe loves you, congratulations, you believe in sentient singularity theory. It's just inevitable that sentient singularity theory is the stacking that is stacked on top of the assembly of what other people are calling theories of everything that are not. And they're not, almost ironically, because they were trying not, even though every single person knows that this is about consciousness. Eric Weinstein knows this is about the structure of mind. He's never said it. To anybody that I've seen publicly, other than me, in a semi-private conversation, he said that the implications of the physics implications of his mathematical thesis implied the existence of God. I asked him. He said yes. And guess what? Every single person who was on that stream that was not faithful, or I don't even want to say faithful, but didn't believe that God exists, didn't even hear him say it. It went like this. It happens a lot. If you're not ready to see something, you won't. It's like me and AE1 stable elements. It's like I wasn't ready to see it, but now I am. Context is key. That means perspective is key. That means philosophers are going to be the winners. People say, oh, well, first it's going to be, a physicist that, create the standard model and general relativity, even though all of them were very much philosophers. And then, you have Eric Weinstein, mathematician, and, I would say Wolfram, more than even being a physicist in the way that we traditionally understand physics, he's a computer scientist, so understands structure of mind, just like what geometric unity is. And these people are closer to truth. The mathematicians and the coders are going to be closer to understanding reality than even people who are looking at, the Planck length, of the pixelation of existence and discovering that. But all of these people know that this is about the structure of mind. None of them will admit it because they're all trying to kind of posture to academia that has everything wrong by not saying that this is about consciousness, because they know that everybody that says that this is about consciousness is labeled woo. And then you get people ostracized who are actually brilliant, like, Nassim Haramein and all these other people, but it's like Einstein believed in God. That's why he was way better than the people who are telling us that the Higgs boson is exactly what they think it is. And it's bullshit. It's bullshit. Breaks the symmetry. Breaks the beauty. It did achieve some kind of sexiness because they made a prediction and they measured it and some type of phenomenon, and it was in alignment with their prediction. The problem is that the prediction came from a relativistic perspective to begin with, not an objective perspective. If it did come from an objective perspective, then we would have people who were well aware of God running CERN, and we don't. And we would have the heads of the physics departments not labeling themselves as atheists. They wouldn't do it. But we do, because they're lost. And they're not even, it doesn't mean they're useless, it just means that they're not going to be able to do what they're trying to do. And they're not even going to realize that they didn't do it. Just like the Higgs. They all think, the whole of the physics community is like, we found the Higgs and this is the God particle. It's like, bro, you're inside the God particle. How is that not inevitable, you fools? Sorry. I mean, they're not fools. They're being foolish. Idiocy is a moment, not a person. Genius is a moment, not a person. And so, they're not fools, they're being foolish. I walk it back a little bit. But, it's not surprising that geometric unity is probably going to be the one theory that kind of starts to unite quantum mechanics and general relativity, because geometric unity is about the relationships between multiplicity, and relativity stems from the relationship from multiplicity, and geometric unity is about uniting into a greater structure, a geometric structure, and that is about, uniting relativity and quantum mechanics, which is manifest from multiplicity. But the standard model comes from my quantum of consciousness model and my creation model, which comes from my creation model, and my which then leads to my cosmological verse model, and that model is going to be found by others, who study it over time and learn things that I don't even know or about it, or learn how to do things with it that I don't know how to do with it, and how to unite it with, the emergence of cells and organisms and molecules and technology and all these things, and relativity. But the standard model obviously comes from my quantum of consciousness structure. It's just obvious. And that fly, or gnat, man, I give it credit. It's a worthy adversary. But the physicists of today, physicists are not. Eric Goldstein is a mathematician. It's more fundamental than physics, but more fundamental than mathematics is perspective. And perspectives are observed by perceivers, and perceivers are sentient beings. This is definitely my best stream yet. 100%. I thank everybody for being on here. I'm not taking off. I will get to all your questions right now, but I was just, sometimes you just gotta just, yesterday all I did was take questions, and I like those moments too. That's a lot of fun, and it veers off. Conversations go in all different directions, and this is a show on the theory of everything, aka Every0ne, and we talk about it, basically everything here. We can relate it to a universal pattern, so we will touch on everything. I love taking questions and interacting with you guys, but sometimes, man, you just get in flow. And that was exactly what that just was. Okay, questions. But isn't that how tech thinks, collective linear? Yeah, but it's not just tech. Tech is a computer. You are not. You compute, but you're not a computer. And this is because you have thoughts and feelings. And feelings are generated by the interpretation of your thoughts via the context of a specific perspective. And then feelings also create perspective, emotional perspective, which creates context. And, this is not what computers have. So you, as a sentient singularity, think in a spiral, not linearly. Even though a computer, yes, does think linearly, you, as a consciousness, thinks in a spiral. And a wise consciousness thinks in, like, a double spiral, like a double helix, or a torus, which is two. It's viewing something from the inside out and the outside in at the same time. It's knowing that you are a sentient singularity and that you define the fact that you can know that you exist because you know that existence exists because you know that you exist. It's like, I think, therefore I am. It really should have been, I feel, therefore I am. Or I think and feel, therefore I am. It's not really I think, therefore I am, because my MacBook Air is thinking right now, but it's not feeling and it's not really there. Molecules that make it up are there. They are sentient beings. MacBook Air is not a sentient being. It's a calculator. And you calculate, which is linear thinking, but that is contextualized in like a self-referencing situation, because a computer doesn't self-reference, but you do self-reference. That's what causes consciousness. But then to become wise is to know even the context of your consciousness, which is inside another consciousness. And you can't really internalize that idea and really get it until you feel. You have feelings for the universe. Like, I pray multiple times a day. And there are times where, in my life, where via different experiences, one I described was like, I was sober, but it was basically a sober DMT experience when I was thinking about exactly what Clearwood said. This was before I even watched this video. I was like, if we're inside a quantum computer in another universe, and then that one's inside another one, inside another one, inside another one, I was just thinking about this, and as soon as I thought about it in the correct perspective, once I was in the shower, and I literally had like the craziest DMT out of body experience, but I was completely sober. I wept on the floor of the shower afterwards. I couldn't talk about it for 2 years without crying to anyone. I remember going to my rabbi and being like, Rabbi, I saw God, like, basically, like, and I was trying to tell him about it, and I was just crying. Couldn't even tell him. Couldn't even get it out. And, sometimes when I'm grateful and I'm, just praying, being grateful for whatever, it is that I'm being grateful for, which is, there's a lot to be grateful for, to the creator of me and my existence. I have multiple times in my life, and multiple times will again, cried, like, which is the physical, expression of emotion, of obvious emotion. And obviously, like, prayer is usually, you don't always have to cry, but like, prayer is an emotional experience, basically, because you're communicating with a sentience. And if you don't think that it's a personal God, you're like, it's a conscious being, but we don't have to anthropomorphize this consciousness. Ridiculous. It's like, I don't have to anthropomorphize my father, or my mother, or my brother, or my sister, or my son or daughter or spouse. It's like, what the heck? You have to anthropomorphize them, or else you don't even understand them. And, how are you going to have a relationship with those people in your life if you don't anthropomorphize them? You want to have a relationship with the universe, you have to anthropomorphize them. Fact. Because it's a sentient, feeling, thinking being. But it communicates with you through emotions. In my model, right here, of the binary triality structure. Gosh, that's so much work on there. I need to reorganize a new document. I do that like every 6 months or so, because they start slowing down. It's got too many tabs. Okay, binary triality. This pattern, binary triality, that's observed in every instance of, observation. Let's go to your senses. And the top one is always like kind of a summation of the rest, just like gravity is a summation of the rest of the forces. But you can see here, you have your 5 senses, and then your 6th sense is emotion. People are like, that movie, The Sixth Sense, it's like, I could see ghosts. It's like, it's not a 6th sense. You're still just seeing things, and hearing things, and, touching and being touched by things. And they're just ghosts in that movie, M. Night Shyamalan's movie, The Sixth Sense. You're not using a 6th sense. 6th sense is actually a 6th sense. It's the interpretation of information, the interpretation of the input of information. And that's what senses are. But what's interesting is that this is a binary, and this is a binary, and this is a binary, and it's also a triality of 1, 2, and 3. It's 2 sets of 3 or 3 sets of 2. And when you break it up, and you realize that sight and smell and hearing are all about inputting information that you don't perceive as physically touching you. Directly touching you, I'll say. Directly touching you. You see something that's perceived as separate from you. You smell something that is perceived as separate from you. You hear something that is perceived as separate from you. When you touch something, you directly perceive it as directly touching you. When you taste something on your tongue has to taste it. It has to touch it. It has to directly touch it. That implies that whatever the 6th sense would be, it also is direct touch. Because these 3 are indirect, and these 2 are direct, so this one has to be the summation of these bottom, if you are going to follow the pattern that's observed everywhere, including in PEMDAS, order of operations. P at the top, parentheses, is all that is encompassed within the parentheses. Think about that. What is this? Your sight, your taste, your smell, your touch, your hearing, all sum to your emotions and thoughts. And it's just that your thoughts are the interpretation of input, and then it is the perception of input, and then the interpretation of input turns those thoughts into this, emotions. And this is the 6th sense. Your perception of objective truth through your thoughts, and your feeling of objective truth literally touching you in a more true way than anything that we can perceive in our relativistic existence. When you have an emotion, it is the universe communicating with you. It is God communicating with you. It is. He's touching you. He's giving you input. And you can't see God because you're inside God. You can't see the forest through the trees. But that doesn't mean that you can't feel it. Of course you can feel it. You can smell it, you can see it, you can, but not objectively, but subjectively, you can see the trees around you. And that feeling is a communication as well. It is. Clear is wrong. You have to anthropomorphize it. You have to. Physics is wrong if it says otherwise. People who claim that this isn't about consciousness know nothing about physics. They've memorized out of context information. You're not a great cook just because you memorize good recipes. You're a great cook when you understand why the ingredients have the effects on each other that they have. When you can build something new or that works, something that works because you're just good at it, not because you got lucky. Not lucky, but there is a perception of luck, but it's subjective. But randomness doesn't exist, so even luck doesn't really exist. It's just, the universe fed you something good instead of you consciously making something good. If you make something good, though, because you understand that if you put this ingredient with this one, it complements this one, and put this one with this one, it creates this new flavor, and once I asked Eric Weinstein, I can show it, about his observers and how he related the tongue or sense of taste to basically his model, and he was talking about how maybe there's a relationship between sweet and salty or sweet and sour, and that's why we like mixing sweet and sour together. It's like, well, you need to understand why that relationship exists in order to make crybabies, those like sour candies that everybody knows is just good. If you don't understand that why sweet and sour work together, then you're going to try and make sour and salty. It's like, that sounds horrible. Like, that's what I'm talking about. The difference between a good cook and somebody that memorized a good recipe that was created by a good cook and passed down, but you didn't make the recipe. Our physics are filled with people who have just memorized grandma's recipe, but never learned why sweet and sour work well together, or why sour and salty is disgusting, and why the Higgs is bullshit. Okay, back to questions. Can you name all those again, please? Clear-Irwin, Robert Grant, Stephen Wolfram, Eric Weinstein. I would say that what's his name? The closest person to a true theory of everything other than mine is gotta be Chris Langan. But the problem is he invents all of his own language, or his language is very complicated. It's not easily understood. He's too smart for his own good, and it's very difficult to make sense of. But from what I've seen, it's aligned with a lot of my work. And his theological beliefs are very similar to mine, and like that implies that we're basically on the same path. But and I'm not saying his isn't more developed, but I'm sure it's more developed. Guy has a 200 IQ and is like, I think he's over 60 years old, and I am 30, and I started on this project 5 years ago, and I don't have a 200 IQ, not even close. Can you rename those theories? Yeah. Geometric unity is Eric Weinstein's. Computational universe, or hypergraph universe, is Stephen Wolfram. Emergence theory is Clear-Irwin. Convergence theory is Robert Grant. Nassim Haramein has a theory. I don't know what it's called other than Nassim Haramein's theory of, unified field theory. All these men, and I would include the double helix by Watson and Crick in this, actually, and I would also include relativity in this by especially Watson and Crick, though. Like, and even the original Standard Model, outside of the Higgs, was also really good job. But, which was what, Bohr kind of was like the father of quantum mechanics, they say, I think. But these people were correct. Even Planck, like the idea of a Planck length of like a pixelization to the universe, a discreteness, that's also true, and it's part of the theory of everything. But when you put all these together and you contextualize them properly in order, what you will see is that they're pointing to sentient singularity theory. Tetrahedron is equal to consciousness, yes. Yes, Sean Carroll blocked me on Twitter because I said that he criticized Eric Weinstein for revealing his part of it, starting to unveil his theory on Joe Rogan. He was like, and he basically said, like, don't take anyone seriously who unveils their physics theory on a podcast. And I was like, dude, you have your own podcast and all you do is talk about like your theory of many worlds all day long. And like, he might think that, oh, well, I actually also submitted to peer-reviewed journals. Well, you know what, dude? Many worlds is crap. So, and like, consciousness is fundamental to existence and there is a God. So, like, you're wrong. Like, I destroyed his argument about God in 30 seconds of my video. I mean, right here. Sean Carroll blocked me. And Sean Carroll, Eric Weinstein criticized him of this too, is Sean Carroll is very dismissing, not confronting, of things that he disagrees with. And that isn't a scientist, guys. A scientist fights. He knows that his idea, that if he can't get his idea to beat the other idea, then he needs to abandon his idea, instead of basically just blocking anybody that says that you're wrong. That's not a scientist. Sean Carroll is not a scientist. He's not. He knows a lot of scientific information. He's very good at memorizing recipes. And he's very good at even teaching you those recipes. And that is valuable. Everybody has meaning, including Sean Carroll. But he's not a scientist. He's not a theoretical physicist that is good at all. At all. Like, I really mean that. Like, and I don't mean that to be mean. Like, if you don't realize that this is about consciousness fundamentally, like, what is the framework? And the thing is he tried to make it not about consciousness fundamentally, because then what this means is that it implies God. But then he tries to do away with God, and what do you get? Many worlds. Which means that every new world is created, a new universe is created every single time that you make a choice. Okay. First of all, he hasn't even defined choice. And I know that because you need God to define the objective reality of choice, because it implies going against your nature and going within a higher truth, essentially. And realizing that when you have a choice between what your nature is telling you and what objective truth is telling you. If you think God doesn't want you to eat pork, but you love pork and bacon, this choice now is a free will choice. But whether or not you wanted yogurt with strawberries or blueberries this morning was not a free will choice, it was an instinctual choice. You can't even realize that context of and actually contextualize choice without God. But many worlds even unconsciously and accidentally puts consciousness at the center, because it says that every universe that is made is new universe comes from you as a conscious being making a different choice. It's like, good job, dude. You're trying really hard to avoid reality. And the problem is that he has essentially unconsciously defined himself by that which he does not believe versus by that which he does. And what you get then is you get the Higgs boson and you get many worlds. But, I mean, just to show, again, how lost these people are. And how much they are not even competition. And I don't mean like Eric Weinstein Clea Irwin and Stephen Wolfram and all of them know, and Robert Grant, like these people see beauty. They just don't at least admit that they anthropomorphize this consciousness of existence. I would say actually Robert Grant does. He doesn't avoid it. That guy is on it. He's totally legit about it. But Eric Weinstein calls himself an atheist, but then tells me that his theory implies God. And then, Clea Irwin says the existence and the universe is a consciousness, but we don't need to anthropomorphize it. It's like, what is this denial happening? I don't know. Maybe it's just posturing. Maybe that's necessary to advancing their theories, which is necessary to advancing my theory even. Like, geometric unity, emergence theory, all these things need to start being proven true, and they are being proven true. Clea Irwin's been publishing to Quanta for years, I think, and great papers. I've only looked at one, but it was great. He described the binary triality, but it was different. He had them arranged as pie graphs, and it was awesome. But I could tell what he was describing. These people aren't competition for me. Other than, if you think your theory is against mine, and instead of contained within mine, and if you truly believe, after discussion, that you don't need to anthropomorphize this consciousness, then yeah, we are in competition. But the structures that their theories are creating are in alignment with mine. But right here, this is how easy it is to take on these physicists.
If you did believe that God was a necessary being, that you literally could not imagine a universe in which God did not play an important role, in order, logically, for me to refute that belief, all I need to do is to invent a universe in which God does not exist.
Invent a universe in which God does not exist.
So according to Sean Carroll, all we have to do in order to show that a conscious creator is not necessary to the existence of a universe is consciously create a universe. Does anybody else see the problem with this?
Exactly. It's that easy. It's that easy. This is why a philosopher like me can do this. You don't need to take physics class. You don't need to know that there's 80... I'm going like this. Hopefully the sound wasn't bad. I'm going to check YouTube. How was the sound on this? Very well said, Tyler. Okay, good, at least. You have Williams eye geckos near... Anexamander Bear is asking. I had Williams eye. I will get Williams eye again. I have Clemmer eye right now. I love both Clemmer eye and Williams eye. They're two of my favorite geckos. If you don't know what that is, look up Phelsuma Clemmer eye or Neon Day gecko or Lygodactylus Williams eye, which is the electric blue gecko. I'll just look them up. You guys can see this. Lygodactylus Williams eye. This is the bluest animal in the world. It's amazing. Look at that thing, man. It's tiny, by the way, too. It's very, very small. It's 3 inches long. And it's got a bright orange belly. And it's bright, bright blue. The other one that I used to have those, and then I also have right now... these are very similar. They're about the same size. They act very similar. They are the Neon Day gecko. Also very small. Also very neon. But that's what somebody was asking about in the YouTube chat regarding my geckos. Very cool. But I need to get to questions because that was one of the questions, though. So we answered it. That's very cool that you even know what Williams eye and Clemmer eye are. That's awesome. Send me a private message on Instagram. I want to talk to you. Gravy starts with a G. Yes, gravy starts with a G. Gravity starts with a G. God starts with a G. lots of things start with a G. Goldstein starts with a G. That's interesting. I remember allegedly about 20-something pounds even when the moon... Yeah, you weigh less on the moon because less gravity is being inflicted on you, but even that is a relativistic perspective on gravity. There is an objective perspective on gravity that's more the focus of my experiment, and it contextualizes it correctly. But I'm not going to go into it right now. Eventually, if I will share the experiment with, first, privately with anyone who is a member of my Patreon, because then if you're supporting this work and you're putting money towards this work, that money will inevitably go towards, this project and pushing that experiment. So obviously we're also going to need grants and stuff because it's going to be more than, maybe not. Jordan Peterson I'm a better philosopher than Jordan Peterson. I like Jordan Peterson a lot, so that's not a diss on him at all. And I know him, and he's a good man, or at least he was to me, always, and to his wife. But I'm still a better philosopher than him, and he makes I don't even know how much on Patreon, enough to finance my project, that's for sure. But yeah, if you contribute to my Patreon, which is linked in the description of this video, and it's also on my website, sentientsingularity.com. When I do share my experiment, I will share it with all Patreon supporters before I share it with anyone else. Even probably I don't know, maybe even before the partners of the experiment. It just depends on timing, but definitely before I share it publicly. I wonder what Stephen Hawking would think of this. Stephen Hawking was a terrible physicist. He was. He didn't believe in God. You can't be a great physicist and not see God. And Eric Weinstein is a very good physicist. He might call himself an atheist, but that's not what he told me when I asked him, does your theory imply the existence of God? And he said, yes. And I know that because I can tell what his theory is, and it implies the existence of God, because it's part of my theory. A highly constrained God that had no choice in how to make the universe, but, and this might be a disagreement with Eric Weinstein, but I'm right if this is a disagreement. God did have a choice in whether or not to make the universe. That was the choice. It wasn't how. It was whether or not to do it. Just like you have no choice in how to go to the refrigerator and get something. You have to walk there right now. If you, or I don't know, if you're in a wheelchair, you can roll there, or if you're really close, you can jump there maybe. But you have degrees of freedom to get there, but you also have a constraint. You can't just zap there right now. And, or you can't make it come to you or anything like that. You have degrees of freedom and you have constraints. So does God. God's initial freedom was, do I continue with my nature of oneness, or do I fight my nature of oneness and create multiplicity of sentience, of consciousness? And that was a free will choice, because he fought his nature. Nature was oneness. That means that creating multiplicity is against his nature. That means that it's a free will choice. Patreon has been giving me trouble lately. I'll try it again tomorrow. Let me know if it's just mine. But that would be very good to know. But I really appreciate that. I will do some special things for my patrons on Patreon. I only have a couple or a few right now, and I really, really, really am grateful for every single one. I'm grateful for every single person watching this. I'm grateful for every person who has liked this video and watched this video. Even if you don't agree with me, if you have given me more than 30 seconds, I appreciate it. But if you're supporting the work, I really am grateful. Immensely. So, I will definitely, I will include, if you're going to include yourself in this project by giving via whether maybe that's helping me by, if you want to make a clips channel, like a Theory of Everyone clips channel, and you're taking the best parts of these videos, because to be honest, they're long and like I don't have the computing power to break them up and then publish like 30 minutes of it at a time very easily right now. So, but if you do, that would be more valuable to me even than like just becoming a Patreon supporter. Like, so if you want to support the work like that, create a clips channel and put up clips of one topic at a time or something, 20 minutes or 5 minutes at a time of these streams, because you think it's good, a good 5 minutes, like that is awesome. And if you do that, tell me, and I will include you in whatever, like I include the Patreon supporters in too, because if you're going to make yourself part of this project, I will include you in this project. If you're going to involve yourself as a participant instead of just an observer, really, especially as far as like, whether that's through energy or information. Information would be currency, so money, or energy, which is, effort. So like making a clips channel. I will absolutely include you in this project, and you guys will hear about my experiment and also my idea for social media site. I'm actually working with somebody that I met with today, to some degree. Very, like, this is the first time I met them, but so I don't want to say, oh, I'm working with them, but like probably will develop into a relationship of working together on some projects and regarding future of social media. So applying the patterns from this to that. And I will definitely include you guys on that stuff too. First, I'll fill everybody in eventually. I don't believe in, there's no reason to hold this stuff back forever. It just, context matters. Order matters. If you know that somebody's going to throw a rock, don't throw scissors. Throw paper. Awesome. Related to Kabbalah? Yes. Kabbalah is metaphysics, and metaphysics is just quantum physics, but with consciousness as the center and God as the context. Like, real quantum physics is metaphysics, and Kabbalah is just metaphysics. So is hermetics. That's just, also metaphysics. Perspectives was my first music project because of this. That's awesome. I want to hear more about that. I'm not very well versed in music, which is crazy because music is the closest thing to a universal language. You don't need to know. You can listen to a symphony and know the emotion that they're trying to convey by just listening to it, and there's no words said the entire time. Emotions are the language of communication objectively, and music is the communication of emotion via frequency and repetition and pattern and, periodicity and amplification and, all these things that people talk about involving metaphysics and physics and math. It's just, music is the math of emotion. Dang, I'm writing that down real quick. Statements. Music is the mathematics of emotion. That's awesome. Your previous video mentioning the tree of life as willpower, responsibility, and emotion fits with my hypothesis of music. In music, we like 1 willpower, 6 responsibility, 4 emotion. Con the vessel, send me a private message and I want to pointing me to your music project. Maybe I'll share it on the stream. Preach. Thank you. I really was on this. This was like a sermon. Don't give up on that. Do it. Mind-blowing. Awesome. Explain the pi and Bible post. There's only one pattern. That's all. That's it. You ever look at a spider web? It's like, then look at, yep. The highest number of electrons that you can perceive, even though there's really one electron, it's a wave, but the highest number of incidents in which you can perceive electrons on the outermost ring of an atom is 8. The universe is supposedly E8. 8 exists. It's it's really 8 periods, but they say it exists in dimension 8. Yeah, to some degree. It's just an overlapping 2 perspectives, of which each have 4 primary perspectives. So the overlap of 4 and 4 is from a specific perspective. So E8 contains atoms that on the outside of their rings have a maximum of 8 visible electrons. Every single animal, except for centipedes and millipedes and like worm type of creatures, that has multiple limbs, that doesn't have 4 limbs, has 8 limbs. There's 4 primary perspectives because that creates stability. That's why there's 4 wheels on a car and 4 limbs on, almost every vertebrate other than snakes and some lizards. And that's also the same pattern is responsible for why don't spiders have 12 legs? Because 8 is the max number of the expressions of a wave on the outermost observation of the wave that is caused by a sentience, essentially. That's why spiders have 8 legs. Octopuses have 8 legs. Squids have 8 legs. Scorpions have 8 legs. It's like everything else under that is either 6, 4, or 2. Or 1, which is a snake. But even my snakes, they don't have... my boas and pythons over there, they have little remnants of legs, and they use them for communication with each other. So my male will go up to the female and he'll it's like tapping each other on the shoulder or something like that. But they'll also use it during sex to just, it's like I don't know, it's just like it's like, I don't know, running your fingers through somebody's hair or something like that. But it's used for communication. But for the most part, 8 is the max number of legs, other than centipedes and millipedes and some worm-type creatures those are also worm-type creatures. I need to look into centipede and millipede leg numbers. I bet you I will be able to reconcile it with this work. And I know certain millipedes have different species of millipedes have different numbers of legs, and also isopods, things like that. But even those numbers, I guarantee you, they will not be arbitrary. They will be numbers found in my theory. There's only one pattern. The Bible follows it. Religion follows it. So do your senses. It's just, there's only one pattern. That's the point of the Bible and Pi post, is that if you really could look at everything objectively, in the most objective context possible, you would see that everything looks the same. But yeah, Sean Carroll blocked me on Twitter. I didn't even make that video yet about God. I just told him, who are you to tell Eric Weinstein he can't talk about his theory on a podcast? F off. They just want to be able to control who gets into the ivory towers. They don't like Eric Weinstein's theory because subconsciously they know what it implies, even if consciously they don't. And that is the existence of God. They hate it because it means that it doesn't just mean that they were wrong about it, they miscalculated. It means their entire worldview is upside down and inside out and wrong. It means they believe that sentience comes from non-sentience. Consciousness comes from unconsciousness. And that life had a beginning. It didn't. It's like, when did life start? These crystals grew. What are you talking about? When did life start? They're not growing anymore because skeletons exist. You know? Skeleton. I have a skeleton. Cacti. I'm from Arizona. You find skeleton of cacti everywhere. This is skeleton. Okay, we're back. Good. This is a skeleton, but at one point it was growing. What do you mean, when did life begin? This was alive. These crystals were alive. They were sentient. They were sentient. Literally. They had thoughts, made choices. With less freedom than, less complexity than we do, which we make choices that are more complex than cells, and cells were more complex than crystals, and crystals are more complex than, atoms, which are more complex than hadrons, but still choices. Did you see Eric get attacked on Clubhouse? No. What did he get attacked by regarding on Clubhouse? I wonder. Very well said, Tyler. Thank you. What would be a good one for? That would be a good one for merch. Do you want to be known as someone, or do you want to be something? That is a very good idea. I'll add it to the list. I've really been coming up with some merch ideas to help fund this project that is, this eventuality of, pushing this work to be discussed by the mainstream, at least. Like, if Eric wants, we have to make this so that Eric Weinstein and Stephen Wolfram and Clea Irwin and Nassim Haramein and even Sean Carroll, hiding in his room from these ideas, have no choice but to admit each other's work and to discuss each other's work, and also to discuss mine. And we also have to eventually do an experiment, and we also have to take the lessons learned from this and apply it to our social environment and how we structure our social environment via a social interaction matrix, online matrix, which I'm working on. So this is the eventual goals of this project. That is more tangible, but it's to help people. The goal of the project overall is to help us make sense of the world and help us see the meaning of each other. That is but that's never going to. I'm not going to fix or perfect the world. The Messiah will do that, and I'm not the Messiah. I don't think so. I really don't think so. And I'm saying I don't think so because, you have to, like I said before, personally, I think it's probably Jesus, but, if it wasn't him, my second pick would be, Nikola Tesla, probably. So, you have to, think about, or then after that it would be, the Rebbe, was, the head of the Chabad Lubavitch Jewish movement. But, you have to understand, that you have to question everything. Question everything. Including, am I real? Am I different from God? You have to answer these questions. Are you God? Are you not God? Are you separate from God? Are you one with God? It's you're both. That's the answer to that. I questioned it a lot. But, is it a simulation? Stupid question. is it real? Yeah, it's real. You know how you know it's real? Not by looking out at space, outer space, and being like, look at this nebula, and look at this, like, black holes and all this stuff, like, how, this is how we're going to prove the nature of reality. No, it's not. First question of the nature of reality is it real? How do you do this? Through two questions. First question is, am I real? Second question is, are the people around me real? If the people around you are real and you're real, it's real. Doesn't matter where it came from. It doesn't matter if it's a quantum computer running in a previous aeon. Like, this is what I mean by, like, understanding comes from understanding inner space, not outer space. Elon Musk is brilliant, but our salvation is not on Mars. Like, satellites are useful to humanity. Low Earth orbit could be useful for, like, printing organs, but, like, we don't need to go to Mars. An asteroid is not going to hit the planet again. Probably already did. Probably caused the flood. It's probably God's doing. Certainly God's doing. Listen to, what's Graham Hancock's friend? Guy who gets on Joe Rogan all the time. Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson. That guy gets it. That guy believes that a comet hit the Earth and flooded the entire world, and it wiped out a previous civilization that was more technologically advanced than us. I believe him. It's also in the Bible. But, you have to question everything, or else you're never going to get to the answers. This is why Sean Carroll is not a scientist, because he doesn't question everything. He just makes assumptions, and then when people don't agree with him and they present evidence to the contrary, like, if he was a good scientist, he would look at my video. He banned me on he blocked me on Instagram because he saw my video of him of criticizing his argument for against God. Like, I'll praise Sean Carroll for what he's good at. He's good at teaching what we already know. But I will say this: he's a shit scientist. And I didn't want to say that because, like, I'm trying to be, like, nice to people. And like I said, I am being nice to him. His show, I learned from him. And I do learn from him and his show, Biggest Ideas in the Universe, about what we already know. But if you're going to block someone simply because they made an argument that logically invalidates your supposedly logical argument, you block them on Instagram. Like, I never harassed him. I made a video, he saw it, and he blocked me on Instagram. And when I criticized him and said, all I said to him on Twitter to get him to block me originally, before I had even made that video, was just, why are you criticizing Eric Weinstein for talking about his theory on a podcast when you get on your own podcast and talk about your own theory all the time? That's all I said. And then I did also say, I said that basically the universities, I forgot how I said it. I said people with better models than the universities will never be accepted by peer review, and therefore have to find alternative methods to showing their work to the world. And, like, that's fine if they do that. And I was not even rude. Like, I don't think so, at least. And I know that I slowed down his voice in that video and stuff, but, like, guys, if you don't have the spine to tackle even that 30 seconds of an argument because for some reason you just don't like it, you're not a good scientist. You're not. You're a good teacher, maybe, and he's a good teacher. I think Sean Carroll's a great teacher, actually. A great teacher. But he doesn't teach things that he discovered. Can we all be messiahs? Maybe. You who believe in my work will do greater works than mine. That is a quote by Jesus that I actually was not aware of. If I have heard it, then I forgot. I need to look at that. I like that. Just because I think it's interesting. I'm going to look at the context of it, though. You have to look at the context of Scripture all the time. But and I don't like people who are like, you have to look at the historical context. It's like, stop. The historical context. You're stuck in relativity. Scripture is objective. It's just like interpretation can sometimes be subjective. But if you're trying to do it through historical context, you're trapping yourself to be subjective and relativistic. But yeah, I like this quote about Scripture. It's somebody said this, and it's true. Jesus said, like, or is described as like, or the Messiah, regardless of even if you think it's Jesus, it's like, the Messiah is the Word made flesh, because the Messiah is the stacking of a consciousness on top of the assembly of humanity. So it is the next universe's consciousness. It's the son of the universe that we're in, essentially, is the Messiah of our universe as well. And then is also the creator of the next universe. Or cosmological verse, as I call it, or aeon. It's not really the universe, but the universe, the father of the universe is God. But the universe is a multiverse chain, and it is a chain of double helix chain of multiple cosmological verses, as I call them, or aeons, as Roger Penrose calls them. Each aeon is a conscious sentient being. Each cosmological verse is a conscious sentient being. It's the highest conscious sentient being in creation, essentially, other than maybe if the universe, as a collective of aeons, maybe has a consciousness that isn't God. But I don't think so. But maybe. I need to think more about it. But maybe. It's either God is the head of that, but I think God is the head of that, because every one of those has an inherent constraint of oneness, and that's the highest constraint, and it's also the highest freedom, and that's why God has that. But they match God, so God is like probably would be the head of that assembly. Anyways, that's from my own thinking to do. Again, like, not on stream. But what did Eric get attacked for? Something about if he was anti-racist or not. It was crazy. Like, what happened to his brother. I did think I heard about his brother talking about that, but I didn't know if Eric was involved. I didn't know Eric was involved. I heard that he was in this room and that basically, like, some person was elevated to moderator on Clubhouse and then made it about race and then basically booted everybody who wasn't a specific race and also a specific race and not really race, but we talk about the objective races in this. There's only two. It's not, black is not a race. It's a phenotype. It's an observed phenotype. But regardless, like, that was the phenotype of being black. They were all blocked except them, and not even just, if you didn't just have to be black, you had to be black and subscribing to whatever narrative they were saying, according to what I heard his brother saying. But I didn't know Eric was involved in that. He was also referred to as a spicy white by the mob. Holy crap! That is, I mean, Eric is good for him for being described as spicy. That means he was brave. And if he was attacked, he was brave. Stand up to the mob. They have no real power. The power is finite. The power of the truth is infinite. But, acknowledge the feelings of the mob as real, but, like, that doesn't mean that their description of the cause is real. It's not. They have less of an understanding of logic than an individual. Always, until they have an individual stacked on top of them. Your cells could not make sense of the world without you. So, that's true of the mob, too. That's why we need what religion calls the Messiah, and, I just call it, like, the next level of life. We wonder what the reason is there was no six-limbed vertebrate species. Yeah, that is interesting. There's no six-limbed vertebrate species. A tail could count as 5. Yes, it could. That's interesting. But it's still not required for stability. But still, that's interesting. I'm going to think about it. On LSD, I saw, because my love for the church, God showed himself to me from inside within my DNA out of pure light and love. I know that as surely as I can feel my hand and I can feel God in the world. Good. I'm not going to tell you that that didn't happen because I would be quite a hypocrite if I did. I think that drugs sometimes can give us a subjective view, which is true, but not as objective as like if you saw something, and you can't see it as objectively as God, but even my experience. But I do believe when people have theophanies on hallucinogens, like I believe them. Like I love the term theophany. It's like you realize the truth because it shows itself to you. God chooses who he reveals to himself. So like when I criticize people who are like atheists on this stream, I want everybody to know, like, not judging them, I was an atheist. I didn't choose to believe in God. I don't choose to believe the sun will rise tomorrow. I just have seen it rise every day and then it sets and then it rises again, and I just, seen it. Why would I not believe what I've seen? That's how I feel about God. So when people say, oh, people who believe on faith, it's like, bro, I had a personal experience as real as anything, more real than anything else in this relativistic existence. And if you're a physicist, then you should understand that. And so it's very possible, but it's not. It's this life is more based on faith than even, or this experience in relativity is more based on faith than an instance in which God shows himself to you. That is not faith. That is awareness. You're seeing something. You're experiencing it. It's just that atheists will be like, well, I've never seen it, so it doesn't exist. Because they either have to confront the idea that maybe God is not showing himself to them for a reason, which that's the truth. And it's not judgment either. Like, I only saw God after I had... the structure I saw was the structure that I was visualizing already. So it's like I only saw what I saw because I was ready to see what I saw. You're not going to see what you aren't ready to see. This is why I said, like, things I've noticed just go over people's heads. Like, one weird thing that I've noticed is like I told family members of mine that I had this experience in the shower. If you tell your parent who's an atheist, I saw God in the shower, and they either have two choices. One, they think you're a liar. Well, there's 3 choices. 2, they believe you, which they shouldn't though, and they won't, and they really shouldn't, because that would be putting your secondhand information relaying to them. It's your first-hand information to you, but to them it's second-hand information. And they're not going to override their first-hand information of their experience with your statements, and they shouldn't. That would be, if somebody does that, you are breaking down your sense-making structures. It's what's called idol worship and in religion, and it will make you crazy, literally, because you lose order. It's rock, paper, scissors is a game of craziness, because you never know what the other person's going to throw. But if you knew what the other person preceding you threw, then you would always know what to throw in order to advance. And this is actually more like a sense-making structure. But basically, like, the only other option for somebody, for your parent or whatever, friend, other than believing you, which wouldn't actually be good, or thinking you're lying, which is also not good. They shouldn't think you're a liar. The only other option is, my kid had a stroke, or like is, I don't know, drugged by somebody else if he said he didn't do drugs at the time, which I didn't. I was completely sober. But the like, what I noticed is that they didn't say, Tyler, I think you need to go get your head checked, and they didn't say, I agree with you, and they didn't say anything. They changed the subject, and then I asked them 2 weeks later, and I was like, remember I said, like, that I, like, saw God? They were like, no. You don't remember when your son told you that he saw God in the shower? Like, how is that? What the heck? Like, that means that we're only able to see, and I can tell you from what I saw in that experience in the first place as well, that this holds true to what I saw there and the information that I got from it. You're only able to see what you're ready to see. If you're not ready to see it, it's literally hidden from you. It just goes. It's like when you're talking about, sex in front of a 2-year-old. It's like they never remember it. They don't. It doesn't make any sense to them. They don't care about it. This is exactly what it's like talking about God with an atheist. They either think you're crazy, which is actually probably like better, because it means they're actually like thinking and perceiving your experience, or your relating of your experience, and they're not taking your word for it, which would be idol worship. They shouldn't do that. They should think you're crazy, or they actually should look, if you're otherwise productive in life, they should say, we are having a misunderstanding. But whatever you think is God is not what I think is God, and we need to actually come to an understanding of each other. But the reality is that for the most part, we just right over our heads, whatever we're not ready to hear. And I've noticed that is very odd. Like, to the point where I like almost started having fun with it. I was like, I like was taking note every time. I wasn't purposely like screwing around or anything like that with this, but I was taking note of every time when I had said something that somebody wasn't ready to hear, and they literally, it was a profound statement. Even if you believed that I was a liar, that's still pretty profound if I'm that much of a liar. Or if they thought, I was crazy, it'd be like, that'd be pretty profound. Or if you thought I had a medical problem, that'd be a pretty profound problem. That's like stroke level problems. If you're like having crazy out of body experiences and stuff, if it's not real and it's just a manifestation of a medical problem, like, you need to go see a doctor. But that's not what happened. They just blocked it out. Or it was just invisible to them. It's very weird. But it also makes perfect sense. It's like, why would somebody be able to perceive information that they weren't yet ready to perceive? We always think we're not ready for something. We're like, some tragedy happens. It's like, I'm not ready to hear about it. It's like, no, you just emotionally don't want to. But, like, God only shows us what we're ready to see. People saying, oh, God only gives us what we can handle. It's like, that's also true. That's true as far as energy goes. It's true as far as information goes too. It's true as far as what you need to put energy into, and also in what you, the information that you interpret via your senses, including your emotions and thoughts. Honestly, the way I party in church, my baptism created an energy that will change the world. Good, Jeff. I think that's great. People can see and feel your energy. I hope that this stream was like that. I'm going to probably get off if there's no more questions. You guys can ask your final questions. I'll give you a few minutes to post them because I know there's a delay on YouTube and stuff. But this was awesome. This was a great stream. It was very much more like focused than yesterday. Yesterday was fine. It was just open question hour at the end, and I want that to happen because this is the theory of everything, is the topic of these always, or the theory of every one really, but also like I want to focus on. I just want these streams to be somewhat focused so that it's not just a guy rambling about everything every single time. Sometimes we can do that. Sometimes we got to make some sense to somebody who's coming into this from a new perspective, and they're not somebody that like has been following the work for a while. Walter Russell had a God experience that lasted for days. I didn't know that, but that makes perfect sense. I've just glanced at his work. And a lot of people tell me that my work is very similar to Walter Russell's, but I don't study Walter Russell because, like I said, I try and avoid people's work for the most part. I like to get an overall view, enough to see whether or not what they're onto, and then that's it. Like, I don't want it to influence my work too much, because I built this from first principles, and I have to continue building it from first principles. If I built it only from what other people have done, I would have the Higgs boson as part of my model, and I would be as lost as Sean Carroll. When we wrote the universal one based on the experience, then he wrote the universal one based on experience. Everybody tells me I need to read that. Eventually I will. I'm purposely not right now, but I will. I'm sure that when I read it, I'll be like, dang, we are like have a lot of similar experiences and worldviews and things like that. But yeah, I mean, I believe. I mean, you look at Walter Russell's work. You know, Einstein was asked, "How's it feel to be the smartest man in the world?" And he said, supposedly said, "Ask Nikola Tesla." Nikola Tesla said, when essentially like that, he thought Walter Russell was even higher. So if Walter Russell had a multi-day experience with God, that would make sense. Because perspective actually is what is responsible for your abilities. I don't have as high of an IQ as Sean Carroll. I would bet. I'll bet probably a decent amount of money on that, actually. My IQ's high, but it's not probably as high as Sean Carroll's. And but it doesn't make him a better physicist than me, because physics everything is philosophy, and philosophy is the study of perspective, and perspective is given to us by God. He controls our exterior experiences, and with us to some degree. We control part of it, but he controls most of it. And this is why I say, like I was saying earlier, don't be mad at atheists for not believing. Like, Christians should never be mad at somebody for not believing in Jesus, or that Jesus is the Messiah, or whatever else you want to label him as, God, Son of Man. Doesn't matter. Like, don't ever be mad at people who don't believe in that. Don't be mad at people who don't believe in God either. It's not their fault. Like, I was an atheist. It wasn't my fault I was an atheist. A self-described atheist, I would actually say there's only anti-theists and theists. But there's not even polytheists and monotheists, and there's just none of this. It's just, are you a theist? Are you an anti-theist? Do you believe consciousness comes from unconsciousness, or do you believe that all there is consciousness, and that unconsciousness is just a perspective of consciousness, but not actually objectively real? When you know that wendigo thing you saw? Apparently that's similar to the Islamic jinn that is depicted. I did know that, actually. I didn't know that you heard that I said that. I know that I said that, and I was like, I wonder how many people are going to see that, because I was skimming through my videos earlier, and I accidentally, I mean, it was an accident from my perspective, but like, I had hit on it. It's not an accident. You're bringing it up now. I looked at it today. That's not a coincidence, but it's not a meaningless coincidence. The universe is maneuvering things to time things properly as we move. But, and it's a personal God. It's not an impersonal, far off, I believe in a higher being, but like, it's not concerned with it. Absolutely, it's concerned with you. It's time you concern yourself with it. But yeah, it is. It's very similar to the jinn. It's like, you know, I haven't talked about that experience. Maybe I will on another stream. I don't really want to do it on this one because it's kind of unrelated, but like that experience, I was having like a sleep paralysis type of experience, and I saw like a demon once, like years ago, and I thought it was just all hallucination. And like I'm not claiming that it wasn't just all hallucination. When you have sleep paralysis, you usually do experience like weird feelings of terror and seeing of bad, things perceived as malicious and stuff like that. Sometimes even people in the atheistical institutions of academia learn about this in psychology class, and I know that because I learned about it. But in my first instance of actual sleep paralysis, I saw something, and it was like I didn't know what it was, and then Will Witt of PragerU was like, "Do you know what a wendigo is?" And I was like, "No, what's a wendigo?" He's like, "A skinwalker." I was like, "Oh, those like Native American legends." And I went to school in Flagstaff, Arizona, which is on at NAU. It's on a Native American reservation, so like we heard, there was like legends of skinwalkers, but like I obviously thought it was nonsense. But then I saw that demon, I thought it was just a hallucination, and then once Will Witt showed me a wendigo, a picture of one on Google Images, and it was exactly what I saw, and I was like, oh my god, I haven't even thought about that for like 10 years. Like that, but I have no idea if it was real, but I probably, but I also, I'm still alive, it didn't kill me, so, but I got this weird vibe. The jinn are supposed to be, in Islam, are supposed to be kind of like tricksters in a way. And I got the feeling that it was like testing me almost, to see if I would like stand up to it, which I did. I was in a room, I'll describe it real quick, whatever. I had sleep paralysis when I was in college, and I had my girlfriend under my arm, and like we had just passed out in bed, like reading on our phones or something, and I woke up and I realized that I couldn't move, and at first I was like, oh my gosh, this is terrible, and then I was like, oh my gosh, this is that sleep paralysis thing we learned about, and then all of a sudden I started feeling like negative energy, and I was even aware though that like that was described a lot by people who had sleep paralysis, because we learned about it in my psych class that year, and or the preceding year maybe. And then I saw this thing like looking into the bedroom from the door, and like I was like yelling at it, and I was like, who's there? And it was like, didn't answer me, and then it just like snuck over to like the edge of the bed and like crept down, and I was like, it almost looked like the aliens on Signs, but not. It was like, if you Google, do you want to see what it was? I'll just show you what it was. And if you think that this was just a hallucination due to, whatever, then that's fine. I'm not going to say it wasn't. But I'm just saying this was my experience. And then we'll end it on this, because I was really good, and then somebody brought up wendigos, and like, here we go. Thank you. Neura X and Bear. I don't know how to pronounce the first part of your name on here, but here. This is what I saw. Exactly that, by the way. Not this one with like the horns. It was like this. Frickin' scariest moment of my entire life. To this day, most frightening moment of my entire life. Whether it was real or not, it doesn't matter. Like, it was the most frightening moment of my life. And I then I realized that it was either me or it, basically, and like I had nothing to fight back with, but I was just like, I have to just fight because it's gonna kill me anyways. So like I really felt it was real. Like, I mean, it was as real as any other experience that I've ever had. And the positions of everything in the room was the same. The position of my girlfriend was the same, and I was like, I was like, babe, wake up. And she was like, woke up, and then she was like, what? And I was like, someone's here. She was like, what? And I was like, I saw this thing crouched it moved to the front of the bed, and I was just like, she just is screaming, and I think we're just dead. Like, I'm like, I don't know what this thing is. I'm not superstitious at all at the time, and I don't even think I'm superstitious now. You can think I'm superstitious for believing in God, but I think that you are not. You're very confused if you don't. But this is not God either, though, so it is different. But wendigos are not necessarily, at least from, I can't tell you, at least right now, they're a logical inevitability. I can't tell you God is a logical inevitability. But I thought I was going to die. I literally thought I was going to die. And I just rushed this thing. I was like, I got to make a stand. And I yelled like William fucking Wallace. And I was like, ah! And I just charged this fucking thing. And and as soon as we were right about to bash heads, and it charged me too, right as we were about to bash, I was right back, and I had my arm around my girlfriend. And I was like, I jumped a bit, and she woke up, and she was like, what? And I was like, looked around the room, everything was exactly the same. It was like we rewound time. It wasn't even like I was in a different place and everything was different. Everything was exactly the same. It was just like we rewound time. And I just looked at her, and I looked around the room, and I realized I could move, because I couldn't move in the start of this, but then in this experience, whatever it was, I could move. That's when I rushed it, I could move. But like when I woke up or rewound time or whatever the hell happened, I have no idea. I was like, I had my arm around her, and I was just like, oh my gosh. I was like, I just had a horrible dream, and she was like, what was it about? And I'm like, I'm not even going to tell you, because you're not going to be able to sleep. Yeah. And that was it. I literally just chalked it up to a hallucination, and never thought about it again until Will Witt from PragerU was like, you know what a wendigo is? And I googled it, and I was like, holy crap. Anyways, that's my end of the night story, so that you all can sleep well. Like I said, you can believe that it was just a hallucination. That's fine. I don't know. But I can tell you it felt as real as anything, and I could actually make choices in it, and I can also, I'm proud of myself for charging it, not just like cowering in the corner. But regardless of whether or not it was real or just a hallucination, the story is true. That would be creepy. It was so far beyond creepy, Chris. It was the scariest moment of my life. And I saw my brother fall off. The only other moment that comes close is like I saw my brother fall off a very tall wall when we were little kids. We had a competition of who could walk along the wall the farthest, and it got higher and higher as you go. And he was probably 5, I was probably 6 or 7. He fell off, and I watched him fall. And he was okay. Actually claimed an angel caught him when we found him, and he had no injuries other than like scrapes, and he fell almost 20 feet onto rock, and he claimed somebody caught him. So that, I guess, ties that into like demons and angels. Who knows? But there's certainly levels of existence that are on frequencies that are not the visible light spectrum. And like DMT, everybody describes the same thing, and people who trip together seem to like see the same thing together. It's like they're clearly seeing something real. It's like you've changed your frequency and you're just tapping into another frequency. It's like that radio station is always playing, but whether or not you can hear it is dependent upon your frequency. Maybe that's true of like wendigos. I had an experience just like that. I was paralyzed and everything, and then I woke up. When I woke up, it scratched me across the face, and then I woke up again for real. And there was this weird, barely visible, sparkling circle on the wall. Honestly, dude, I don't disbelieve you at all. I totally believe you. I can't not believe you. So, that's scary. That's very scary. I know how scary that is, because I had that happen. So, and guys, if you believe that DMT lets you see what do they call them on like Joe Rogan? The machine elves. If you believe that machine elves are real, don't doubt wendigos. Anyways, God bless, guys, and yeah, that could have been horrible. Maybe God protects us, even if that's real. God protects us. Like, fear is due to you only looking at things subjectively, not objectively. So, if you look at the big picture and you're looking at it from the right perspective, the perspective of Sentient Singularity Theory, like, God, there's nothing to fear but God. I will end it on that. This was an awesome stream. Even the final random story was good. I definitely loved it. This was my favorite stream. Anybody who wants to contribute to this project, clippings, even if it's me talking about a wendigo, put it up somewhere. And tell me that you did it, and I will make sure to add you to the list to be included on, being part of projects before they become public. Just as if you are donating to my Patreon, which if you want to do that instead, or in addition, I would also be greatly grateful. And that is linked in the description of this video and also on my website, sentientsingularity.com. Please subscribe to my email list because they will eventually ban me on here because I will talk about things that out of context are going to seem controversial instead, which in reality are beautiful and affirming of everybody's meaning, actually. But good luck convincing the Washington Post. So, anyways, good night, guys, and thanks again for tuning in. God bless, and, stand up to wendigos. Peace.